Reciprocity. Reciprocity is one of the most deceptively powerful psychological forces driving human behavior. It's not just a social nicety, it's an ancient survival mechanism deeply wired into our minds. From the earliest days of human civilization, cooperation meant survival, and those who returned favors were trusted, protected, and included. Today, that same primal instinct still governs our interactions, compelling us to repay what we receive, even when we don't consciously want to. At its core, reciprocity is the invisible string that tugs at our sense of fairness. When someone gives us something, a gift, a compliment, even attention, it creates a subtle imbalance within us. The brain registers this as a debt, a weight that demands to be evened out. This discomfort is powerful enough to override logic, making us act against our own interests just to restore equilibrium. That's why a free sample makes people buy products they never intended to, and why a favor done by a stranger makes you feel obligated to return one. It's not manipulation in the traditional sense, it's influence hidden beneath the illusion of kindness. Dark manipulators understand this mechanism intimately. They know that giving doesn't have to come from genuine generosity. It only needs to look that way. A small act of generosity, a helpful gesture, a sincere compliment, or a simple favor can plant a psychological hook so deep that the target feels emotionally compelled to repay it. The manipulator doesn't need to ask outright. The feeling of indebtedness grows quietly, gnawing at the target's conscience until compliance feels like relief. This tactic is most effective when the gift is unexpected. When someone receives kindness without anticipation, their guard drops completely. It feels pure, authentic. Yet that's precisely when the mind becomes vulnerable. The victim believes they're choosing freely, when in reality they're being subtly steered. Imagine receiving help when you're at your lowest. Someone offers comfort, listens to your pain, maybe even supports you financially or emotionally. Gratitude blossoms into trust, and trust soon becomes a chain. Once you've accepted their generosity, refusing their request later feels cold, even cruel. You tell yourself you're being fair, but you're actually being controlled. Reciprocity doesn't stop with tangible favors. Words, gestures, and emotions all carry this magnetic pull. A manipulator can shower you with validation, making you feel seen and valued, only to later demand loyalty or obedience in return. You might not even notice the exchange happening. It feels natural, almost moral. The human mind resists being the one who owes. That's what makes this tactic so dangerous. It exploits your best traits, empathy, fairness, gratitude, and twists them into tools of submission. When used with dark intent, reciprocity becomes a trap disguised as generosity. It's the smiling coworker who does you a favor before asking for your help later, the partner who sacrifices so much to make you feel guilty for wanting freedom, the friend who gives endlessly just to control your loyalty. It feels wrong to say no to them because they've given so much, yet that's exactly the spell reciprocity casts, making you confuse obligation with kindness, debt with devotion. Social proof. Social proof is the silent puppeteer of human behavior, the invisible hand that pushes us to conform, comply, and follow. It's the force that makes us look to others before deciding what's right, safe, or acceptable. Deep inside, we crave belonging more than truth. Our brains are wired to believe that if everyone else is doing something, it must be correct. This instinct once protected us from danger, helping early humans survive by following the tribe. But in modern society, it's become a weapon, one that can be used to steer thought, emotion, and action without ever commanding it directly. When a crowd laughs, we laugh. When they panic, we panic. When they applaud, we join in, even if we don't know why. This is the essence of social proof, the surrender of judgment in exchange for social safety. We tell ourselves we're thinking independently, but in reality, We're scanning for cues, for signs that we fit in. No one wants to be the outlier. No one wants to be rejected. So we mirror the majority and convince ourselves it's reason, not fear, guiding us. Dark manipulators exploit this weakness with surgical precision. They create illusions of popularity, manufacturing approval to shape perception. A product with thousands of fake reviews suddenly seems trustworthy. A social media post flooded with likes becomes truth, no matter how hollow it is. A crowd clapping makes you feel wrong for staying silent. The brain doesn't verify, it obeys. The more people you think agree, the harder it becomes to resist. It's not logic at play, it's survival. Social proof becomes especially dangerous in moments of uncertainty. When we lack information, we outsource our judgment to others. We assume the group knows something we don't. A manipulator thrives in these moments of hesitation. They flood your senses with evidence of acceptance, smiling faces, apparent success, the illusion that everyone supports their idea. You begin to question your own instincts, thinking, maybe I'm the one who's wrong. It's a subtle erosion of confidence, replaced by blind conformity. Even silence can become a tool of control. If everyone in a room nods while one person stays quiet, that silence feels like rebellion. The pressure to conform builds until resistance feels unbearable. Cult leaders, influencers, and corrupt authorities all understand this. People rarely think for themselves when surrounded by perceived consensus. They think in echoes. Social proof doesn't just manipulate actions, it manipulates emotions. It makes you feel safe when you agree and anxious when you don't. It's why people laugh at jokes they don't find funny or defend ideas they barely understand. It's not reason, it's belonging. The fear of being the only one who disagrees can silence even the strongest voice. The brilliance of this manipulation lies in its invisibility. No one orders you to follow. You do it willingly, thinking it's your choice. You tell yourself you're aligning with the truth, when in fact you're submitting to the crowd. And the more people comply, the stronger the illusion becomes, until the lie feels like law and the truth feels like isolation. Authority. Authority is one of the most intoxicating and dangerous forms of influence ever discovered. It's the psychological spell that makes people obey without question, believe without evidence, and follow even when their instincts scream to stop. The presence of authority doesn't just persuade, it commands. It bends perception, silences doubt, and rewires morality. When someone appears powerful, credible, or in control, the human mind is conditioned to submit. We mistake confidence for competence, dominance for truth, and that illusion has led ordinary people to commit extraordinary acts, both noble and horrifying. From childhood, authority shapes us. Parents, teachers, bosses, leaders all create a pattern in the brain. Obedience equals safety. Those who comply are rewarded. Those who question are punished or shamed. This conditioning becomes a reflex. We learn to suppress resistance in the face of status symbols, a uniform, a title, a tone of certainty. Our subconscious whispers, they know better, they have the right, and so we hand over our judgment, our freedom, and sometimes our conscience. The true manipulators of authority understand that it doesn't require real power, only the appearance of it. A confident voice, a sharp suit, a few credentials, or a prestigious association can turn a nobody into a master of influence. They speak as if every word is fact, and because doubt is uncomfortable, we believe them. The human mind craves certainty, and authority provides it like a drug, soothing, absolute, and addictive. In experiments, people have obeyed authority figures to the point of harming others, simply because a person in a lab coat told them to. That's the terrifying beauty of this manipulation. It doesn't demand coercion, it invites compliance. You want to obey. You feel safer doing what you're told because it shifts responsibility away from you. They're in charge, your mind whispers. They must know what they're doing. and in that moment, your moral compass begins to fade. Authority also weaponizes fear. When people are uncertain, frightened, or desperate, they search for leadership. A manipulator steps in with unwavering confidence and simple answers. They don't need to prove their credibility. They just need to project certainty when everyone else hesitates. People follow not because they trust, but because they need to believe. This is why charismatic leaders, cult figures, and corporate tyrants gain such blind loyalty. They offer clarity in chaos. The symbols of authority, badges, suits, followers, money, status, become hypnotic triggers. We see them and surrender without realizing it. A manipulator doesn't have to be right. They just have to look unshakably sure. The tone of authority crushes the voice of doubt. And once the target obeys once, the pattern is set. Each act of compliance makes the next one easier until obedience feels natural, like breathing. Authority is powerful because it hides behind trust. It convinces you that submission is rational, that following is safer than thinking. It tells you that power equals wisdom and that questioning equals danger. And so people obey, even when their hearts are screaming not to. Scarcity. Scarcity is the art of making something feel precious by convincing you it's almost gone. It preys on the most primal part of the human mind, the fear of missing out, of being left behind, of losing what could have been yours. Deep down, scarcity taps into survival instincts older than civilization itself. Our ancestors hoarded food before winter, fought for resources, and learned that limited meant life or death. That same instinct still drives us today, even when the stakes are nothing more than a pair of shoes or a fleeting opportunity. The darker side of scarcity lies in how it hijacks logic. When we think something is rare, the brain releases a surge of urgency and desire. The calm, rational part of us is overridden by a whisper that says, "You must act now or lose forever." Manipulators understand this perfectly. They don't sell you a product, an idea, or an emotion. They sell you time running out. Every limited offer, only two left, or final chance message isn't just marketing, it's psychological warfare. It creates panic disguised as excitement, urgency masked as opportunity. When scarcity enters the mind, it transforms perception. Suddenly, the object or person seems more valuable, not because it truly is, but because it's slipping away. It's not the thing itself we crave, it's the loss we're desperate to avoid. Scarcity flips the emotional equation. We no longer chase gain, we flee from absence. The manipulator knows this, and they use it to push you into action before your rational mind catches up. They make you feel that hesitation equals regret, that patience equals failure. In human relationships, scarcity becomes even more dangerous. The moment someone pulls away, their value seems to skyrocket. When attention is withdrawn, love feels scarce, and that scarcity makes it addictive. A manipulator will use this rhythm like a drug dealer. Give affection, then take it away. You begin to chase their approval, desperate to win back what was lost. They don't need to threaten you or demand your loyalty. You give it willingly, just to feel whole again. The scarcity of their love becomes the proof of its worth, even when it's nothing but control. Social scarcity is another weapon. Being excluded, ignored, or left out triggers the same fear of loss. Manipulators will create artificial hierarchies, implying you're almost good enough, almost accepted. You start competing for recognition that never truly existed. It's the illusion of scarcity that enslaves you, not scarcity itself. Scarcity's brilliance lies in its ability to disguise manipulation as motivation. It feels like excitement, like opportunity, like destiny. But underneath, it's fear, raw, instinctive fear that clouds judgment and drives compliance. You stop thinking about whether you want something and start worrying about who will get it before you. The moment that fear takes hold, the manipulator doesn't need to convince you anymore. You'll convince yourself. Liking. Liking is one of the most seductive forms of influence. Soft, invisible, and devastatingly effective. It doesn't demand compliance. It makes you want to comply. When we like someone, our guard lowers. We rationalize their behavior, forgive their flaws, and subconsciously align our decisions with theirs. The manipulator doesn't force control. They charm it out of you, wrapping manipulation in warmth, humor, and familiarity. It's not intimidation that bends your will, it's affection. Humans are wired to follow those they like. From childhood, we associate likability with safety, trust, and belonging. We seek approval from those who smile at us, praise us, and make us feel understood. Our brains crave connection so deeply that we mistake friendliness for goodness, charm for integrity, and attention for affection. The dark manipulator knows this better than anyone. They don't need to argue, threaten, or prove. They only need to make you feel special. The liking principle thrives on similarity. We are drawn to people who mirror us, our values, speech, humor, and even our struggles. A skilled manipulator crafts a reflection of you so perfect it feels like fate. They laugh at your jokes, share your opinions, and finish your thoughts. You begin to feel seen, finally understood. But what feels like connection is actually construction. They're not showing who they are. They're showing who you want them to be. Compliments become currency. Each one disarms you further. A well-timed, "you're different," or "no one gets me like you do," forges emotional dependency. You start to crave their validation because it feels rare, pure, and personal. But that's the trap. Every kind word is a thread, and together, those threads weave control. The manipulator creates emotional debt, not through favors, but through affection. The liking tactic also weaponizes charm, smiles, eye contact, light touches, and warmth, all designed to bypass skepticism. You don't analyze someone you like, you trust them. The darker the intent, the brighter the charm. It's why scammers seem kind, why abusers start out gentle, why leaders who ruin lives often seem magnetic. Liking blinds you. It makes you protect the very person exploiting you, because believing they're manipulative would shatter the illusion you've fallen for. Even subtle likeness, shared interests, matching opinions, mutual enemies creates powerful emotional bonds. Manipulators engineer these moments deliberately. They agree with you to gain your confidence, only to twist that trust later. And by the time you realize it, your emotions are already invested. You don't want to see their mask fall, because seeing it means admitting you were deceived. Liking makes manipulation feel like love, like loyalty, like destiny. You don't notice the control because it feels good to be chosen, admired, understood. That's the poison in its sweetness. It doesn't force you to obey. It seduces you into wanting to. Consistency. Consistency is the silent chain that binds the human mind to its past choices. It thrives on our desperate need to appear stable, reliable, and true to ourselves, even when that very need becomes our prison. Deep within the psyche lies a powerful drive, the desire to be seen as consistent. We equate consistency with integrity, predictability with trustworthiness. Yet manipulators know the truth. Consistency can be weaponized. It can turn conviction into obedience and free will into habit. Every decision we make, no matter how small, carves a path in the brain. Once we commit to something, our mind bends reality to justify that choice. We defend it, nurture it, and protect it from contradiction. To admit we were wrong feels like an attack on our identity, and so we double down instead. This is where dark manipulation takes root. The manipulator doesn't need to force control. They just need to secure your first yes. Once you've agreed once, your subconscious will do the rest, pushing you to stay consistent even when the situation changes. It begins subtly. A salesperson gets you to answer a harmless question. You care about your health, right? A lover asks for a small favor. You trust me, don't you? A leader demands loyalty. You believe in what we're doing, don't you? The moment you say yes, the trap begins to close. Your mind links that yes to your self-image, and every future action gravitates toward protecting it. Refusing later would feel like betraying yourself, so you comply, not because you're weak, but because your identity is now part of the game. Consistency makes people predictable, and predictability is control. A manipulator will remind you of your words, your promises, your earlier actions, twisting them into invisible obligations. You said you'd always be there. You promised to help. You believed in this once, and you obey, not because you want to, but because inconsistency feels like guilt. The fear of being seen as unreliable becomes stronger than the desire to be free. The power of consistency isn't only external, it rewires how we see the world. Once we take a stance, confirmation bias sets in. We filter out any evidence that challenges us. The manipulator doesn't need to argue. They simply align their message with your earlier choice. The more you defend it, the deeper the hook goes. Before long, you're not protecting them. You're protecting yourself. You've built an emotional cage around your own decision, and walking away would mean tearing down a part of your identity. That's the dark genius of consistency. It transforms self-respect into self-deception. It makes us prisoners of our own words, our own promises, our own need to appear certain. We convince ourselves that staying the same is strength, when in truth, it's submission disguised as integrity. Foot in the door. The foot in the door technique is one of the most quietly sinister forms of manipulation, deceptively harmless at first, devastating in its progression. It works not by forcing compliance, but by gently guiding it inch by inch until you find yourself agreeing to things you once swore you never would. It begins with something small, innocent, almost unnoticeable, a favor, a yes, a tiny act of cooperation. But that first yes is the seed. Once it's planted, it grows roots deep inside your psyche, twisting the way you see yourself and what you're willing to tolerate. Humans have an intense need to stay consistent with their past decisions. When we say yes to something, we unconsciously reshape our self-image to match that action. If you agree to a small favor, your mind quietly labels you as helpful or cooperative. The next time a slightly larger request comes, denying it feels like betraying your own identity. The manipulator knows this, and they exploit it ruthlessly. They don't demand, they suggest. They don't argue, they remind you of who you already are. And before you realize it, you've walked yourself into compliance, step by step. The dark brilliance of the foot in the door method lies in its subtlety. No one feels manipulated when the request seems small. Can you help me with this? Can I borrow this for a minute? Would you mind signing this? Each tiny agreement lowers your resistance, conditioning your mind to comply automatically. The manipulator builds momentum through your own choices. By the time they ask for something truly significant, you don't see it as manipulation. You see it as consistency. You're just being reliable. You're just following through. But deep down, something inside you knows you've crossed a line you never consciously agreed to. This tactic thrives in personal relationships, workplaces, and even politics. A toxic partner might first ask you to change one small habit, stop talking to someone, give up one activity, make one little sacrifice. It feels harmless, but over time, each small concession stacks on the last until your boundaries are nothing but memories. In workplaces, it's the boss who first asks for a quick favor after hours, then a weekend, then total devotion. You tell yourself it's temporary. It never is. What makes the foot in the door technique so dangerous is that it weaponizes your own morality. It doesn't fight your values. It uses them. You comply because you want to be good, loyal, consistent. You rationalize every step because turning back would mean admitting you've been controlled. The manipulator knows that once your self-image is tied to cooperation, you'll defend your obedience as free will. And so manipulation becomes invisible. There's no shouting, no threats, no obvious coercion, just a series of small, reasonable requests. each one easier to accept than the last. By the time you look back, the door isn't just open. You're already inside, and it was you who let them in. Door in the face. The door in the face technique is a masterclass in controlled rejection, a psychological trick that turns no into yes by making you feel like you're regaining control when in truth you're being guided all along. It begins with an audacious request, something unreasonable, even absurd, one that's meant to be refused. And when you decline, as anyone naturally would, the manipulator retreats, offering a smaller, more reasonable request. That second ask feels fair, balanced, even kind. You say yes not because you want to, but because it feels like compromise. This manipulation thrives on contrast and guilt. The initial rejection creates tension inside you, a sense of discomfort that demands resolution. Humans are wired to avoid feeling selfish or uncooperative. So, when the manipulator meets you halfway, your brain rewards you for restoring balance. You feel generous, cooperative, even moral, without realizing you've just been maneuvered exactly where they wanted you. What feels like negotiation is actually orchestration. Dark manipulators use this tactic because it hides control inside compassion. They appear flexible, understanding, willing to concede, when in reality, their first request was never meant to succeed. It's bait. The outrageous demand exists solely to make the real goal seem modest. A parent who asks their child to clean the entire house before settling for just the kitchen. A boss who asks you to work an entire weekend, then compromises with one long day. A partner who pushes a boundary too far, then eases back just enough to seem reasonable. The second request always feels like relief, not manipulation. Emotionally, the door in the face works because rejection activates empathy. When someone lowers their demand after you've said no, it feels like they've made a sacrifice for you. You subconsciously want to reciprocate that sacrifice by agreeing. You're not just saying yes to the new request. You're saying yes to the feeling of fairness. It's psychological theater. They act humble, you play kind, and in the end, the manipulator gets exactly what they wanted under the illusion of mutual respect. What makes this tactic truly dark is its emotional aftertaste. You walk away thinking you've made the decision, believing you've asserted your boundaries, but beneath that confidence is the quiet truth that your rejection was planned for. You never had control. The manipulator did. They crafted a scenario where no was part of the route to yes, where resistance became compliance, and where your sense of fairness became the very tool used against you. In skilled hands, the door in the face isn't just a persuasion method, it's emotional choreography. The manipulator plays rejection like a symphony, using guilt as rhythm and contrast as melody. The more empathetic you are, the more deeply it works. Because the moment someone makes you feel like they've compromised for your sake, your guard falls and you mistake surrender for kindness. Anchoring. Anchoring is the psychological art of setting the mind's foundation before a decision is even made. It's the invisible chain that binds perception to the first number, idea, or emotion you encounter. Once an anchor is dropped, every thought that follows is pulled toward it, quietly, powerfully, relentlessly. The manipulator doesn't need to control your choice. They only need to control what you compare it to. The brain is lazy when it comes to judgment. It craves reference points, something to measure against, something that feels like certainty. So when we hear a price, a fact, or a statement, our subconscious clings to it like driftwood in a storm. Even when we know it's arbitrary, it shapes our perception of everything that follows. A $1,000 watch suddenly makes a $400 one seem cheap. A person described as brilliant but arrogant will seem intelligent no matter how foolish they sound later. The first impression anchors reality. Everything after is just adjustment. Dark manipulators use anchoring to warp perspective. They start high when they want you to settle low, or start low when they want you to feel lucky getting less. A salesman quotes, a ridiculous price, watches you recoil, then negotiates down to what they wanted all along. A partner sets emotional expectations through dramatic highs and lows so that their minimal effort later feels like generosity. A boss sets impossible goals so that exploitation feels like opportunity. It's all about control through contrast. Anchoring isn't limited to numbers, it feeds on emotion too. The first feeling someone associates with you, an idea, or an offer, becomes its emotional anchor. If they make you laugh early, you'll excuse cruelty later. If they trigger fear first, everything calm afterward feels like safety. Manipulators orchestrate emotional anchors as masterfully as con artists orchestrate stories. They know that once your heart connects a certain feeling to them, your mind will keep returning to that first spark, trying to make sense of the contrast. The most dangerous anchors are invisible, the ones set through repetition, suggestion, or subtle priming. Hearing the same narrative over and over, "You're lucky to have me, no one else would understand you, this is normal," slowly reshapes what you believe is real. Each repetition drives the anchor deeper until perception itself is altered. You stop questioning because the anchor has become truth. Anchoring thrives in firsts: the first offer, the first compliment, the first judgment, the first emotional high. That's when the manipulator strikes, because the first impression doesn't just color perception, it defines it. Once the mind accepts an anchor, even undeniable evidence struggles to move it. That's why people stay loyal to abusers, trust proven liars, or defend false beliefs. The anchor doesn't just hold the idea in place, it holds you. Framing. Framing is the dark art of bending perception without ever changing the facts. It's not about what you say, it's about how you say it. The human mind doesn't respond to reality, it responds to interpretation. Words, tone, and context form invisible borders around thought, shaping how people see, feel, and decide. A manipulator doesn't need to lie when they can frame the truth. They can make the same situation look like triumph or tragedy, danger or safety, love or betrayal, simply by changing the angle from which it's seen. At its core, framing exploits a flaw in human cognition. Our brains crave context more than truth. We don't process information objectively. We anchor our emotions to the way it's presented. Tell someone they lost 10% and they panic. Tell them they kept 90% and they relax. Nothing changed except the frame, yet the emotional reaction is completely different. That's the power of this manipulation. It makes people feel they're thinking freely, when in fact, they're trapped inside someone else's narrative. Dark manipulators are masters of emotional contrast. They twist tone and structure to make obedience feel noble and resistance feel shameful. They frame sacrifice as loyalty, submission as love, silence as wisdom. They don't command. They suggest a version of reality that feels so natural, you stop questioning it. The choice they give you isn't real. It's framed to look balanced, when one option has already been poisoned. Framing works because emotion outweighs logic in decision-making. The manipulator sets the scene before your rational mind even wakes up. A threat becomes an opportunity, a demand becomes a favor, a betrayal becomes a lesson. Each word is carefully chosen to steer your perception, to make you reinterpret pain as meaning or injustice as fate. By the time you realize what's happened, the emotional narrative has already taken hold. You no longer see the situation, only the story they built around it. It doesn't take power to use framing. It takes control of language. Advertisers use it to sell illusions, leaders to justify cruelty, lovers to excuse control. I'm not manipulating you, I'm helping you grow. This isn't pressure, it's encouragement. You're not being used, you're being trusted. Every line redefines reality until you can't separate truth from tone. The facts remain the same, but the emotional meaning has been rewritten. Framing's darkness lies in its subtlety. It never forces, it guides, it doesn't silence the truth, it drowns it in a prettier version. The victim believes they're choosing when they're only choosing within the limits of the manipulator's design. The frame becomes the world, and the world becomes the lie. Decoy effect. The decoy effect is one of the most cunning psychological manipulations ever crafted because it doesn't tell you what to choose. It tricks you into thinking you chose freely. It's the art of control disguised as freedom. On the surface, it looks like simple decision-making. In reality, it's a silent illusion, guiding you toward one predetermined choice while making you believe it was your idea all along. At its core, the decoy effect works by introducing a third, deliberately inferior option, the decoy. This decoy isn't meant to be chosen. It exists to distort your perception of value. When faced with two options, people weigh them directly. But when a third, cleverly crafted one enters the mix, similar but slightly worse than the option the manipulator wants you to pick, it warps your sense of comparison. Suddenly, the better option shines brighter, not because it's better, but because the decoy makes it look irresistible. Imagine walking into a cafe. You see two coffee sizes, small for $3, large for $7. Most people would take the small. It's cheaper, practical. But then they add a medium for $6.50. The medium isn't meant to sell. It's there to make $7 seem reasonable, even smart. You feel clever for spotting the value, but that's the trap. The illusion of choice designed to lead you exactly where they wanted. The dark beauty of the decoy effect lies in how invisible it is. You never feel forced. There's no pressure, no overt persuasion, just a gentle nudge wrapped in logic. The manipulator doesn't need to convince you with words. They control your context. They build the stage so that every path, every comparison, subtly pushes you toward the same destination. You feel empowered, but you're already dancing to their rhythm. Marketers use it to make you spend more. Politicians use it to steer public opinion by framing one option as reasonable compared to an extreme one. In relationships, manipulators use it to make their behavior seem acceptable by contrasting it with something worse. At least I'm not like them, they'll say, and suddenly their flaws fade into the background. You don't realize it, but your mind has been anchored by the decoy, the phantom choice that never truly existed. The most chilling part? The decoy doesn't need to be real. A fake option, an exaggerated scenario, even a suggestion of what could be worse is enough to tilt your judgment. Once the comparison is set, your brain does the rest. You justify, rationalize, and defend the decision, believing it was rational when it was emotional all along. The decoy effect isn't about forcing a choice. It's about framing it. It bends perception, reshapes logic, and rewrites desire. You walk away feeling confident, even proud, unaware that every detail of your decision was carefully engineered. The puppet strings are invisible, but the dance is always the same. You move exactly where the manipulator wanted you to, smiling as you do. Contrast principle. The contrast principle is the silent magician of perception, a force that doesn't change reality, but changes how reality feels. It's not about what's true, it's about what you see next. The human brain can't measure value in isolation. It compares, weighs, and judges everything relative to what came before. Manipulators exploit this flaw masterfully. They know that the first impression doesn't just shape the next, it controls it. Imagine being shown a $1,000 jacket first, followed by a $200 one. The second suddenly feels cheap, even if it's overpriced. Or meeting someone arrogant before meeting someone slightly self-centered. Suddenly, the second person feels humble, even likable. This is the contrast principle in motion. It warps your emotional baseline, manipulating your sense of fairness, beauty, cost, and morality. You're not responding to truth. You're reacting to sequence. The darker side of this principle lies in its subtlety. A manipulator doesn't need to lie. They just need to control what you see first. They anchor your perception to an extreme. then offer what they truly want you to choose as the reasonable alternative. It feels like your decision, but it's been architected from the start. The first option is bait. The second is the trap you step into willingly. This technique thrives in sales, relationships, and power dynamics. A boss might overwhelm you with a monstrous workload proposal, only to compromise with a slightly smaller one that still benefits them. A partner may cross a boundary, then backtrack just enough to appear considerate, making you feel grateful instead of violated. The manipulator knows the secret. If they distort your expectations, your standards will betray you. Emotionally, the contrast principle feeds on exhaustion. When you're overwhelmed, your brain latches on to whatever feels better, not necessarily what's good. The moment someone offers relief after discomfort, they own your gratitude. It's a pattern abusers, con artists, and master negotiators understand well. First, they break your frame, then they rebuild it in their favor. You start thanking them for the cage they built around you because it feels wider than the last one. The mind's need for comparison is a weakness few escape. A manipulator will surround their offer with noise, chaos, or ugliness just to make it shine brighter by contrast. They create emotional whiplash, pain, then comfort, fear, then calm, rejection, then approval, training your nervous system to associate them with relief. It's not the offer you want, it's the shift that seduces you. Once you understand the contrast principle, you begin to see its fingerprints everywhere, in advertising, romance, politics, and persuasion. Every better-than-before moment is a carefully arranged illusion. Every reasonable compromise, a premeditated descent. The contrast principle doesn't force you. It fools you into believing you've chosen freedom when you've merely accepted the lesser chain. Because, explanation. The word because is one of the most underestimated weapons in psychological manipulation. It looks harmless, innocent even, but behind it lies one of the most powerful triggers in the human brain, the craving for justification. People don't just want to be told what to do, they want to believe there's a reason for doing it. The moment you give them that reason, even a weak, meaningless one, their resistance begins to melt. The mind hears because and assumes logic follows. It's a reflex, not a reasoned choice. This instinct is rooted in our need for coherence. The human mind despises uncertainty and thrives on cause and effect. When someone says because, it signals that the world makes sense again. Whether the explanation that follows is rational or absurd, it soothes the discomfort of confusion. That's why experiments have shown that people comply with simple requests at shockingly high rates when they're followed by because, even when the reason is trivial. May I cut in line because I'm in a hurry? Works almost as well as may I cut in line because I need to make copies. The magic isn't in the reason, it's in the word. Manipulators wield because like a scalpel, they know that the human brain doesn't scrutinize every explanation. It simply wants closure. So they craft statements that sound reasonable enough to bypass skepticism. You need to trust me because I care about you. Do this because it's what everyone does. Stay because we've been through so much. The reasons may be hollow, but they feel complete. The word itself creates the illusion of logic, allowing emotion to slip in unnoticed. The because effect also weaponizes authority and empathy at once. When a manipulator gives a because, they're offering reassurance, an answer, a purpose, a direction. People crave that structure, especially in moments of uncertainty. The more anxious or confused you feel, the more you long for reasons. And when someone provides one, even falsely, it feels grounding. That's why cult leaders, toxic partners, and persuasive figures use endless chains of because to build a false narrative of reason, so you never question their control. Over time, the brain learns to accept these explanations automatically. You stop evaluating the logic and start responding to the rhythm. Because becomes a lullaby for the critical mind. Each repetition deepens the habit. Obey because, agree because, trust because. You fill in the blanks with your own logic just to keep the illusion intact. It's not that you stop thinking, it's that you start thinking for them. The darkness of this tactic lies in how gentle it feels. The manipulator doesn't shout, threaten, or command. They explain, they reason, and because you crave understanding more than truth, you listen. You tell yourself it makes sense, not realizing that sense itself has been constructed for you. Every because plants a seed of compliance, and every seed grows into obedience, disguised as agreement. The manipulator doesn't need to prove, they just need to explain. Persuasion. Persuasion is the manipulation that happens before persuasion, the art of shaping someone's state of mind before you even deliver your message. It's not about what you say after they're listening, but about what you make them feel before they decide to listen at all. A skilled manipulator doesn't push people into compliance, they prepare them for it. They plant emotional seeds that bloom into agreement, guiding thought before thought begins. The essence of persuasion lies in attention. Whatever captures your focus in a moment shapes how you perceive everything that follows. The manipulator knows this and uses it like hypnosis, subtle, invisible, effective. Before making a request, they steer your attention toward feelings that favor their outcome. They might talk about honesty before asking for information or about generosity before requesting help. The context softens resistance. You don't even realize your mind has been tuned to say yes before the question arrives. Human emotion is a doorway, and persuasion opens it quietly. If someone makes you feel safe, you become compliant. If they make you feel guilty, you become pliable. If they make you feel seen, you become loyal. It's a psychological ambush. Your defense is lower, not because of the message, but because of the moment before it. By framing your focus, they turn your own emotional rhythm into their weapon. Dark manipulators wield this technique with precision. They create an atmosphere where agreement feels natural and disagreement feels wrong. A salesperson might first ask, "You value family, right?" before pitching an expensive vacation. A controlling partner might reminisce about loyalty before asking you to cut off friends. A leader might invoke fear or unity before demanding obedience. Each setup primes the target's emotions to align with the manipulator's desired outcome. By the time the real request comes, resistance feels like betrayal. Persuasion thrives on association. The manipulator links their idea to a value you already hold sacred. They don't change your beliefs, they redirect them. They make compliance feel like integrity. You don't feel tricked, you feel consistent with who you are. That's the brilliance of it. It turns manipulation into self-justification. You convince yourself it was your own choice, when in truth the decision was made for you before you even realized it. This form of control is powerful because it's invisible. You never noticed the strings because they were tied before the puppet moved. It feels like connection, empathy, or coincidence, but it's orchestration. Every glance, every word, every pause is calculated to shape what you'll feel seconds later. And once your emotions align, logic doesn't stand a chance. The manipulator doesn't win the argument. They win the moment before the argument begins. Storytelling. Storytelling is the most seductive form of manipulation ever created. It doesn't argue, it doesn't demand, it enchants. It slips past reason like smoke, wrapping itself around your emotions until you can't tell the difference between what's true and what feels true. A well-told story doesn't just entertain, it reshapes beliefs, rewires memories, and forges loyalty stronger than logic ever could. The human mind is built for stories. We don't process data, we live through narratives. That's why stories can make us cry over fiction, love strangers, and obey lies that sound beautiful. From the beginning of time, stories have ruled us. Ancient tribes gathered around fires to share myths that shaped their morals. Religions, nations, revolutions all began with someone telling a story that made people believe. We are not driven by facts. We are moved by meaning. The manipulator knows this and crafts stories not to inform, but to possess. They weave emotion, identity, and fear together until their truth becomes yours. The most dangerous stories don't sound extraordinary. They sound familiar. They echo your dreams, your pain, your hope. The manipulator mirrors your experience back to you through narrative, making you feel understood, seen, validated. Once that emotional connection is made, the storyteller no longer needs to persuade. You'll follow willingly. You'll defend them, even against evidence, because their story lives inside you now. It's not persuasion anymore, it's belief. Every master manipulator is a storyteller at heart. Politicians frame their agendas as heroic journeys. Brands craft origin myths to sell trust. Abusers rewrite reality into a tale where they're the victim and you're the ungrateful one. The narrative becomes armor against accountability. You're not questioning them, you're questioning the story, and stories don't like to be questioned. The brilliance of storytelling lies in how it hijacks your empathy. When you listen to a story, your brain releases oxytocin, the chemical of bonding and trust. You feel closer to the teller, more willing to believe them. Facts trigger skepticism. Stories trigger surrender. You begin to feel what they feel, see what they see, and if they want you to feel guilt, fear, love, or anger, all they need to do is narrate it vividly enough. Your body reacts as if it's real. But storytelling's darkest edge appears when it's used to rewrite the past. A manipulator will retell shared experiences, subtly altering details to cast themselves as the hero or victim. Over time, their version becomes your memory. You start to question your own perception, doubting what really happened. That's not persuasion, it's psychological possession. Storytelling doesn't need to scream to control you. It whispers. It paints pictures so vivid that you mistake imagination for truth. And once you believe the storyteller owns not just your attention, but your mind. Specifics. Specifics are the illusion of truth, the art of making words feel real by dressing them in detail. The human brain is addicted to precision. It craves the concrete, the measurable, the vivid. When something sounds specific, it feels trustworthy. We believe what we can picture, what we can almost touch. Manipulators know this. They understand that while vagueness invites doubt, specificity builds conviction. A lie wrapped in precise detail feels more authentic than a vague truth. Specifics bypass skepticism. They don't argue with logic, they seduce it. When someone tells you, "I'll call you soon," it's forgettable. But when they say, "I'll call you at 8:15, right after my last meeting ends," your brain locks in. The precision feels like honesty. It feels real. Yet, this very feeling is what makes specifics such a dangerous weapon in manipulation. The more vivid the image, the more your critical thinking shuts down. Dark manipulators use specifics to plant certainty where none exists. They lace their words with sensory anchors, colors, times, names, emotions, so your imagination fills in the rest. They might say, "I was sitting in that tiny coffee shop on 3rd Street, the one with the red stools and the smell of burnt sugar, when I thought of you." It sounds innocent, personal, intimate, but it's also control. Each detail is a hook, pulling you deeper into their crafted world until you mistake their precision for sincerity. Specifics also make manipulation memorable. The mind forgets generalities but clings to details. A skilled liar won't just say, "I was busy." They'll say, "I was stuck in traffic for 43 minutes behind a blue delivery truck." It doesn't matter if it's true. The specificity makes it feel true. You can see it, and once you see it, you believe it. That's how false memories form, through details that sound too real to doubt. Emotionally, specifics make you feel seen. When someone recalls the exact date you met, the color of your shirt, or the words you use, it activates a deep sense of recognition. You think, "They remember me, they care," but often that memory is weaponized to gain trust, to reopen emotional wounds, or to tighten their grip. Specifics blur the line between connection and control because they mimic the intimacy of truth. The manipulator's genius lies not in what they say, but in how they say it. Every detail becomes a breadcrumb leading you where they want you to go. They use specifics to dominate conversations, control narratives, and make their version of reality irresistible. Once your mind accepts those details, it resists contradiction. After all, how could something so vivid be false? Specifics turn words into mirrors, reflecting not what is, but what they want you to see. And once that reflection feels familiar enough, you stop questioning whether it's real. You simply believe. Simplify the ask. Simplify the ask is one of the most insidious manipulations because it disguises control as ease. It works not by forcing action, but by removing friction, making compliance feel effortless, natural, even right. The human brain hates complexity. We crave clarity, shortcuts, and simplicity, especially when faced with decisions that feel overwhelming. The darker mind knows this. They don't demand submission. They make saying yes the path of least resistance. At its core, this tactic exploits a cognitive bias known as decision fatigue, the gradual erosion of willpower caused by too many choices or too much thinking. When people are tired, distracted, or emotionally charged, they stop analyzing and start defaulting to whatever option feels simplest. The manipulator uses this weakness as their entry point. They shrink their demand until it seems harmless. Just sign here. Just come for a little while. Just hear me out. That word, just, is the soft blade of psychological persuasion, slicing resistance without you even feeling the cut. By simplifying the ask, they bypass the mind's natural defenses. Instead of triggering suspicion or internal debate, the request feels manageable. It feels like nothing, and that's the brilliance of it. Once you've said yes to something small, you've already begun the path towards something big. Compliance creates momentum. Each small yes makes the next yes easier. The manipulator doesn't have to win your agreement outright. They build it brick by brick under the illusion of simplicity. This tactic works even better when paired with emotional priming. When someone feels guilty, flattered, or indebted, they're desperate for an easy way to make things right. The manipulator offers that out. You don't have to do much, just this one thing. The target accepts, grateful that the request isn't worse, but that small action becomes psychological commitment. Once you've acted in someone's favor, you start to justify it internally. You tell yourself you did it because you wanted to, not because you were influenced. And that self-deception cements the manipulator's control. The simplicity isn't about the task, it's about the perception of it. A skilled manipulator reframes the ask so it feels insignificant. They minimize the time, effort, or risk involved. It won't take long. It's no big deal. You'll barely notice. Each phrase lowers your guard. Each reassurance blinds you to consequence. And when you comply, they escalate slowly, transforming small favors into major sacrifices, one unthinking yes at a time. In relationships, this can look like tiny compromises that accumulate into control. In business, it's the harmless signature that leads to obligation. In persuasion, it's the casual agreement that grows into allegiance. The manipulator never forces. They simplify. They make obedience feel easy, almost comforting, while resistance feels complicated, exhausting, and unnecessary. That's the true darkness of simplifying the ask. It doesn't fight your will. It lets your own desire for ease betray you. You don't feel tricked because the choice felt simple, but simplicity, in the wrong hands, is not kindness. It's the quietest form of control. Reduce friction. Reduce friction is the art of removing every obstacle between desire and decision. It's not persuasion through pressure, it's persuasion through ease. The manipulator doesn't force you to say yes. They simply make saying yes the path of least resistance. Every barrier that could trigger hesitation, Effort, time, doubt, complexity is quietly stripped away until compliance feels natural, even pleasurable. You don't realize you're being guided because the path is smooth, familiar, and effortless. Human behavior is lazy by design. The brain saves energy wherever it can, and ease feels like safety. When something requires no thought, it feels right. This is where dark manipulation thrives. A skilled manipulator doesn't make you want something more. They make it easier to get. So your brain mistakes convenience for choice. They understand that people rarely chase what's right. They chase what's easy. Every design, conversation, or system can be engineered to reduce resistance. A manipulator makes the decision seamless. A single click replaces a careful review. A vague agree button replaces a wall of fine print. A gentle just try it replaces a hard sell. They know hesitation breaks spells, so they build environments where hesitation can't survive. You don't feel pushed, you feel guided. You tell yourself, it just made sense, when in truth, it was made simple. In relationships, this tactic takes on an emotional form. A manipulator smooths your path toward dependency. They make it easy to rely on them, to confide, to stay. They anticipate your needs, solve your problems, and erase your discomfort until you stop thinking for yourself. They create a world where you no longer question because questioning feels unnecessary. You surrender not from pressure, but from comfort. That's the quiet genius of reducing friction. It doesn't provoke resistance, it erases it. The mind equates difficulty with danger. When something is easy, it feels trustworthy. Manipulators twist this instinct into a weapon. They remove frictions like cost, doubt, or guilt so subtly that you barely notice your own compliance. The easier the action, the harder it becomes to see the manipulation. A predatory lender hides consequences behind one-step approvals. A toxic partner hides control behind convenience. I'll handle it for you. Each layer of ease removes a layer of autonomy. Reduced friction doesn't scream manipulation. It whispers safety. It feels like good design, like help, like kindness. But behind its softness lies control. You aren't being convinced, you're being streamlined. Every choice you make was already shaped, every movement predicted, every hesitation designed away. You think you're moving freely, but you're sliding down a slope that someone else built, greased with comfort, aimed exactly where they want you to land. Give choices. Giving choices is one of the most deceptive manipulations of all. The illusion of freedom wrapped in invisible control. It makes you feel powerful, autonomous, in charge of your destiny, when in reality, every path you're offered leads exactly where the manipulator wants you to go. It's the perfect trap because it doesn't look like a trap. You don't resist it. You embrace it. You thank them for letting you choose. The human mind craves autonomy. We hate feeling controlled, but we love feeling in control. Manipulators understand this instinct intimately. They know that if they offer you a decision, 2, 3, maybe 4 options, you'll focus so intensely on which to choose that you'll never stop to ask why these are the only choices available. They construct the walls around your freedom, then hand you the keys to a cage you never noticed. In sales, this tactic is everywhere. Would you like the standard package or the premium? It's never about whether you want it at all, only which version of compliance feels most comfortable. In relationships, manipulators use it to disguise dominance as compromise. Do you want to talk now or later? Either way, the outcome benefits them. The structure is always the same. Remove the option of refusal, but make the target feel respected. It's obedience disguised as empowerment. Psychologically, choice creates ownership. Once you decide, even within constraints, you feel responsible for the outcome. That sense of control locks you in emotionally. You'll defend your decision, justify it, even suffer for it, because it feels yours. The manipulator no longer needs to force you. You'll enforce it yourself. That's the cruelty of this tactic. It enslaves through consent. In darker relationships, giving choices becomes a method of soft coercion. A controlling partner might say, "You can go out with your friends, but if you do, don't expect me to be around." A parent might tell a child, "You can choose to obey, or you can live with the consequences." Each choice carries hidden punishment. There's always a right answer, the one that serves the manipulator, and a wrong one that brings pain. You're not choosing freely, you're choosing survival. Even in negotiation, leadership, or politics, the illusion of choice is weaponized. The manipulator defines the narrative and the boundaries of possible decisions. You're allowed to pick your side within their system, but never outside it. You're encouraged to argue within their terms, thinking you're exercising freedom when you're only strengthening their control. The brilliance of this manipulation lies in how grateful people feel for it. Being offered a choice activates pride and satisfaction. You feel respected, seen, and valued. But the manipulator smiles because while you were busy deciding, you never noticed who was holding the frame. And that's the secret. They don't take away your freedom. They make you use it against yourself. Defaults. Defaults are the invisible persuaders, the quiet settings that shape your choices before you even realize you've made them. They don't shout or demand. They whisper, gently guiding you toward a decision that feels like your own. The human brain is wired for ease. Faced with too many options, it seeks the path of least resistance. Defaults exploit this instinct by presenting one choice as the natural, effortless one, the one that requires no effort to select and a little guilt or friction to refuse. Dark manipulators understand that control doesn't always come from what you choose, but from what you don't bother changing. The power lies not in the options themselves, but in how they're arranged. A checkbox already ticked, a policy already accepted, a subscription set to renew automatically. All of it feeds off one fundamental truth. People rarely alter the status quo. The mind confuses default with correctness, thinking, if this is how it's set, it must be right. Psychologically, defaults hijack your cognitive laziness. They give the illusion of freedom while quietly eliminating it. You feel in control because you could change the setting, but you won't. Not because you don't care, but because your brain has already accepted the easy path as safe. Manipulators use this inertia to their advantage, designing environments where doing nothing is the same as compliance. You become a participant in your own control, trapped not by force but by comfort. Defaults also weaponize trust. When an authority or system presents a pre-selected choice, we assume it's the best or most ethical one. It feels curated, protective, considerate, but it's often strategic, crafted to benefit the manipulator's agenda while masquerading as convenience. This is how companies keep you subscribed, how organizations gain consent, and how people subtly shape your decisions in relationships. You don't have to do anything. Sounds kind, but it's the softest form of manipulation, one that thrives on your passivity. In human dynamics, emotional defaults are just as potent. A manipulator might establish patterns of behavior that become your emotional baseline, apologizing after every outburst, withdrawing affection to make reconciliation feel like relief, setting silence as the default, so you're the one who always reaches out. Over time, you stop questioning these defaults because they've become familiar, predictable, normal. You mistake comfort for peace, habit for choice. The brilliance of the default lies in its subtlety. It doesn't demand obedience, it assumes it. It hides behind normalcy, turning apathy into allegiance. You don't feel pressured, but you're being guided. You don't feel controlled, but you're being contained. That's why defaults are so powerful. They never ask for your permission. They simply wait for your inaction. And when you finally notice the direction you've been led, it feels too natural to resist. Time pressure. Time pressure is the manipulator's clock ticking inside your mind, a psychological countdown that makes you feel like every second you hesitate costs you something precious. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It whispers, hurry, decide now, don't think too long. It traps you in urgency, clouding reason with adrenaline. The brain interprets limited time as limited opportunity, and fear begins to take the wheel. The manipulator doesn't need to convince you with logic. They just need to convince you that you don't have time for it. Humans are wired to equate urgency with importance. The faster a decision must be made, the more significant it feels. This instinct once protected us from predators and danger. Act quickly or die. But in modern life, this reflex is easily hijacked. Time pressure turns the mind from thoughtful to reactive, transforming rational people into impulsive ones. It's why flash sales, limited spots, and ending tonight are irresistible. They bypass deliberation entirely. Under pressure, the brain trades caution for relief, making any decision feels better than facing the anxiety of delay. Dark manipulators exploit this perfectly. They create artificial scarcity of time to trap you in emotional urgency. They'll tell you, you have 5 minutes to decide, or I need your answer now. They'll make hesitation feel like failure, delay feel like loss. The pressure isn't real, but your reaction is. Your pulse quickens, logic slips away, and you grasp for the fastest way to escape the tension, saying yes. The manipulator doesn't overpower your will. They shrink your window to use it. Time pressure works especially well when it rides on top of emotion, fear, excitement, hope, or desire. In those heightened states, your decision-making center goes quiet, drowned by chemical noise. A toxic partner might say, if you don't want this, I'll just leave now. A manipulative boss might demand, I need your answer by the end of the meeting. You rush to respond, terrified of the consequence of delay, unaware that the deadline was a lie designed to corner you. Once the choice is made, you feel relief, mistaking submission for control. What makes time pressure so powerful is that it feels self-generated. You think you're the one rushing, you're the one deciding. But the manipulator crafted the tempo. They set the pace of panic. They know that a racing mind doesn't question, it reacts. They don't want you calm, they want you flustered. They want your heartbeat to drown out your reason. Every second that ticks by tightens their hold, not through force, but through fear. When done well, time pressure doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like necessity. You tell yourself, I had to act fast, or I didn't have a choice. But you did. You always did. You just weren't given the time to realize it. And that's the genius of this tactic. It doesn't take away your freedom. It steals the moments you need to use it. Loss framing. Loss framing is the dark mirror of persuasion. It doesn't tempt you with gain. It terrifies you with what you stand to lose. It bypasses logic and strikes at the heart of human vulnerability, our primal aversion to loss. The mind feels pain from losing something twice as powerfully as it feels joy from gaining it. A manipulator doesn't have to promise you heaven. They only have to whisper the possibility of hell. When used skillfully, loss framing doesn't just influence choices, it hijacks them. At its core, this tactic exploits one of the most ancient survival instincts. Early humans who feared losing food, shelter, or tribe were more likely to survive. That instinct still lives in us. We protect what's ours, even when it no longer serves us. That's why we cling to toxic relationships, bad investments, and false hope. The manipulator knows this. They don't fight your desire for more. They weaponize your fear of less. They show you the ghost of what you'll miss, the emptiness that will follow, the regret that will haunt you if you say no. Loss framing transforms indecision into panic. A manipulator paints the absence of their offer as disaster. You'll regret letting this go. Imagine how you'll feel if someone else gets it. Once this chance is gone, it's gone forever. Each phrase is a dagger aimed at the same place, the fear of loss. You stop asking whether it's right and start asking what you'll suffer if you refuse. The logic collapses under the weight of imagined pain. This technique thrives in scarcity and emotion. It's why sales pitches warn of last chances and final calls. It's why controlling partners make you fear losing love more than losing freedom. It's why leaders frame disobedience as betrayal, because the human mind would rather cling to something harmful than face emptiness. Loss, even the illusion of it, hurts so deeply that people will obey, conform, or submit just to avoid it. The brilliance of loss framing lies in how it rewrites value. Something worthless can seem priceless once it's about to vanish. People will chase what they didn't want yesterday simply because they might not have it tomorrow. A manipulator doesn't need to increase desire. They only need to amplify fear. The illusion of potential loss makes the ordinary feel sacred. Emotionally, loss framing turns relationships into traps. If you leave, you'll never find someone who loves you like I do. If you stop supporting me, you'll destroy everything we've built. These aren't arguments. They're psychological chains. They force you to measure your future by your fear of losing the past. Loss framing doesn't push. It pulls, dragging you toward the very outcome you'd resist if you were calm. It feeds on urgency, regret, and nostalgia, making you mistake anxiety for importance. The manipulator never needs to shout. They just have to make you imagine the emptiness that comes with no. And in that moment, you'll choose yes, not because you want to win, but because you can't bear to lose. Highlight norms. Highlighting norms is one of the most insidious manipulations because it doesn't force you, it shames you. It convinces you that your thoughts, feelings, or actions are wrong, not because they are harmful, but because they are different. It's the psychological pressure of the herd, the suffocating whisper that says, everyone else is doing it. Why aren't you? The fear of isolation is more powerful than the desire for truth, and manipulators use that fear to sculpt your behavior until you no longer act from choice, but from the desperate need to belong. At its core, this tactic exploits humanity's most ancient instinct, survival through acceptance. In primitive tribes, rejection meant death. To be cast out was to starve alone, vulnerable and unseen. Though society has evolved, that instinct hasn't. Our brains still equate disapproval with danger, so when someone highlights a social norm, what most people believe, what everyone agrees on, our subconscious reacts as if our safety depends on conformity. We comply, not to fit in, but to stay alive in the only way our biology understands. Manipulators know this better than anyone. They speak the language of consensus to silence resistance. Most people would agree. Everyone feels this way. No one does what you're doing. Each phrase slices away at your individuality, replacing it with collective pressure. The brilliance of this technique lies in how subtle it is. It doesn't attack you directly. It isolates you. It makes you feel like an outcast for even questioning. And when belonging feels threatened, most people surrender their truth in exchange for comfort. In groups, this tactic spreads like wildfire. One person's hesitation vanishes when surrounded by nodding heads and confident voices. The manipulator knows that once they control the visible majority, the rest will fall in line. It's why social media thrives on visible metrics. Likes, shares, followers. Those numbers are modern-day tribal signals, telling you which opinions are safe to hold. It's not persuasion, it's behavioral containment. You don't need to be convinced when you're terrified of being alone. In relationships, highlighting norms becomes emotional blackmail. Every good partner would do this. Most people in love don't act like you. It turns affection into obedience, morality into control. You start doubting yourself, wondering if your boundaries are selfish or if your instincts are broken. Over time, the manipulator's version of normal becomes your standard of right and wrong. You adjust, shrink, comply, just to escape the invisible punishment of disapproval. The darkest brilliance of this manipulation is that it feels like guidance. It masquerades as wisdom, culture, or care. The manipulator doesn't shout. They simply remind you what everyone else already knows. They don't need to convince you to agree. They just make you terrified not to. And once you internalize that fear, they no longer have to enforce conformity. You'll police yourself, believing you're only doing what's right. Testimonials. Testimonials are the emotional mirrors of persuasion, the borrowed voices that convince you to trust, buy, or believe not because of logic, but because someone else already did. They cloak influence in familiarity, transforming strangers into proof. The power of testimonials lies not in facts, but in belonging. When we see others express approval, we feel safe aligning with them. It's not just persuasion, it's psychological camouflage, a manipulation wrapped in the illusion of shared experience. From birth, humans learn through imitation. We look to others to decide what's safe, what's good, what's worth our attention. Testimonials hijack this primal instinct. A smiling face, a heartfelt quote, a video of someone just like you telling their story. It all feels genuine, unfiltered, real. Yet, behind that sense of connection is a carefully engineered performance. Manipulators understand that emotion, not logic, drives trust. And nothing triggers emotion faster than seeing a peer validate a choice we're unsure about. The darkness in testimonials comes from how easily they distort authenticity. They can be exaggerated, rehearsed, or outright fabricated, but the brain doesn't care. It doesn't run a background check. It feels. A trembling voice talking about how a decision changed their life bypasses skepticism. You start imagining yourself in their place, craving the same relief, the same success, the same belonging. The manipulator doesn't sell the product. They sell the transformation through someone else's story. In relationships and social influence, testimonials take an even subtler form. A manipulator may use others' opinions to validate their worth or authority. Everyone says I'm such a good listener, or people always tell me I'm the only one they can trust. These lines aren't boasts. They're psychological shortcuts meant to make you skip your own evaluation. You accept their reputation as reality because it's easier to believe the collective than confront the uncertainty of your own judgment. The emotional potency of testimonials lies in their vulnerability. They often mirror the deepest human fears, the fear of being wrong, the fear of being alone, the fear of missing out. Seeing others satisfied or grateful soothes those fears and replaces them with longing. You don't just want what they have, you want to feel what they feel. The manipulator uses this yearning as leverage, making you chase a result that might never have existed. What makes testimonials particularly insidious is that they look selfless. They appear to come from others, not from the manipulator. This separation makes them harder to question. Even when your instincts whisper that something feels rehearsed, the presence of multiple voices drowns that intuition. The crowd becomes the proof, and doubt feels like rebellion. Testimonials blur the line between authenticity and performance. They remind us that belief is contagious, and that perception of truth often matters more than truth itself. When enough people claim something is good, real, or right, it becomes nearly impossible not to feel the pull, because no one wants to be the only one left unconvinced. Visual proof. Visual proof is the manipulator's masterpiece, the art of showing, not telling, and making the image more powerful than truth itself. The human mind believes what it sees, even when what it sees is a lie. A picture bypasses skepticism. A chart, a photo, a before and after, a staged video. Each can implant certainty deeper than words ever could. We are creatures of sight, wired to trust our eyes even when our reason hesitates. And manipulators know this. If you can see it, you'll believe it. Visual proof works because the brain processes images faster and with more emotional impact than language. A single glance can trigger judgment, conviction, or trust before a single word is read. A smiling face on a testimonial makes a stranger's opinion feel real. A luxurious setting in an ad makes wealth feel attainable. A few stage photos online can create the illusion of success, authority, and happiness, all without a shred of truth. The manipulator doesn't have to convince you with argument. They simply feed your eyes the version of reality they want you to believe. The danger lies in how real it feels. Visual evidence doesn't just tell a story, it anchors it emotionally. You see a happy couple on social media and assume they're in love. You see a polished logo and assume professionalism. You see a confident pose and assume competence. The brain fills in everything the image doesn't say. Manipulators use this automatic completion against you. They craft visuals not to inform, but to persuade, to perform truth rather than reveal it. In the digital age, visual proof has become the ultimate weapon of deception. Filters, editing, deepfakes, stage environments, all can turn illusion into gospel. The manipulator curates what you see, framing each image to evoke desire, envy, or trust. They know that perception is more valuable than reality because perception creates reality. People will follow, love, or buy based on what they see, not on what's true. Even in personal manipulation, visual proof thrives. A toxic partner shows you pictures of happy moments to make you question your pain. A liar points to their achievements, trophies, or friends as evidence of sincerity. Look, they say, this proves who I am. And it works, because seeing feels like knowing. You begin to doubt your instincts, surrendering to the comfort of visible validation. The brilliance of visual proof is that it doesn't ask for trust. It manufactures it. It speaks in color, symmetry, and emotion, bypassing logic entirely. Your mind sees, feels, and believes before you can think. And once the image lodges in memory, it becomes your truth. You'll defend it, recall it, build stories around it. The manipulator knows this. They know the image doesn't need to be real. It just needs to be seen. Demonstrate competence. Demonstrating competence is the art of controlling through credibility, of wielding respect like a leash. It's not about brute persuasion or emotional pull. It's about power disguised as proof. When someone appears capable, skilled, or unshakably knowledgeable, people instinctively defer to them. It feels safe to follow the one who knows. That sense of safety is the core of this manipulation, turning admiration into obedience and trust into surrender. Competence captivates because it answers one of our deepest fears, uncertainty. When the world feels chaotic, the competent person becomes an anchor. They speak with calm precision while everyone else drowns in confusion. Their confidence radiates authority. Their skill commands respect. And slowly, without realizing it, you stop questioning. You start believing that they must be right because they're good at what they do. The manipulator knows this and uses it to weave influence so quietly it feels like faith. They don't need to demand trust. They earn it through demonstration. A few displays of mastery, a moment of effortless problem solving, a calm solution in crisis, and suddenly their word carries more weight than evidence. The mind confuses competence with morality, assuming that skill implies integrity. That illusion is their weapon. The more capable they appear, the less you scrutinize their intent. You trade skepticism for security. You think, they've proven themselves. Why would they mislead me? In dark manipulation, competence becomes a mask. It hides motives behind success. A skilled manipulator uses their achievements like armor, deflecting doubt with proof of performance. The more flawless they seem, the harder it becomes to challenge them. They may even stage small victories to reinforce the illusion, solving problems they created, offering guidance for crises they sparked. Each triumph deepens your dependence. You stop making decisions because they know better. You start handing over your judgment for the comfort of certainty. This tactic thrives in relationships, workplaces, and leadership. A manipulative partner might always know best, subtly making you feel naive for questioning them. A toxic boss might flaunt their expertise to silence subordinates. A charismatic leader might use data, credentials, and technical jargon to dominate discourse, making dissent look ignorant. The trick isn't in being right, it's in appearing right more convincingly than anyone else. What makes demonstrating competence so effective is its emotional undertow. It feeds your longing to trust someone stronger, smarter, or more certain than you. It feels good to lean on stability, to follow someone who seems to have the answers. That's the psychological snare. Comfort masquerading as confidence. You start to equate their brilliance with benevolence, their expertise with truth. And once that link forms, questioning them feels like questioning reality itself. Competence doesn't just earn trust, it reshapes it into dependence. The manipulator doesn't beg for belief, they perform it. And in that performance, you forget that skill can be a mask, and that intelligence, in the wrong hands, can be the sharpest blade of all. Guarantees. Guarantees are the velvet gloves of manipulation, soft to the touch, reassuring in tone, and deadly in effect. They disarm suspicion, cradle fear, and create a seductive illusion of safety. A guarantee whispers, "You have nothing to lose," and that single promise is enough to make people lower every guard they've built. It's the lie that doesn't sound like a lie, the illusion that trust can be bought, risk can be erased, and betrayal can be made impossible. The human mind craves certainty. We're wired to fear the unknown, to seek comfort in promises that sound absolute. Manipulators exploit this need by weaponizing reassurance. They don't win trust through integrity, they manufacture it. A contract, a promise, a vow, or a smile can all serve the same purpose, to convince you that no harm can come from saying yes. The truth, however, is that guarantees are often nothing more than psychological sedatives, soothing words that keep you still while the walls close in. A manipulator understands that once you believe you're safe, you stop questioning. A guarantee makes you emotionally lazy. It silences the voice of doubt. Don't worry, I promise. You have my word. You can always walk away. These phrases lull you into compliance. You want to believe them because believing feels good, and the brain always chases comfort over caution. The darker the manipulator, the more perfect their guarantee will sound. They'll craft it to mirror your deepest fear of loss, pain, abandonment, and then promise the exact opposite. In business, this trick appears as money-back offers or risk-free deals designed not to protect you, but to make you act impulsively. You click, you sign, you buy, not because you're certain of the product, but because the illusion of safety feels intoxicating. In relationships, the guarantee takes a softer form. I'll never hurt you. You can trust me. I'm not like the others. Each word is a thread pulling you closer until your trust becomes a weapon used against you. The power of guarantees lies in their emotional anesthesia. They numb the part of you that hesitates, the part that warns. Something feels off. Once numbed, you surrender willingly. The manipulator doesn't have to chase you. You walk straight into their control, smiling, comforted by the illusion that you're protected. The betrayal comes later, slow and quiet, when you realize that safety was never real. It was bait. Guarantees work because they mimic love, loyalty, and honesty, the things we most want to believe in. And the more broken someone is, the easier the guarantee takes hold. People who have been hurt crave certainty, and manipulators offer it like a drug. I promise, they say, I'll never let you down. And in that moment, your heart stops asking questions. You don't see the cage being built. You only see the open door that looks like peace. Trial periods. Trial periods are the illusion of freedom, the beautifully wrapped trap that whispers, you have nothing to lose. They present themselves as generosity, as trust, as an invitation to explore without consequence. But behind that softness lies one of the most effective psychological manipulations ever designed. A trial doesn't sell you on what something is. It sells you on what it feels like to have it. And once you've tasted ownership, the idea of letting go becomes unbearable. The human mind doesn't handle loss rationally. Once something enters your life, your brain marks it as yours. Even if it was free, even if you never asked for it, possession rewires attachment. This is the endowment effect. the invisible shift that makes us value what we already have more than what we don't. Manipulators exploit this flaw masterfully. They know that giving you access, even temporarily, doesn't just attract curiosity, it builds emotional dependency. You don't decide to keep the thing, you decide not to lose it. Trial periods seduce through safety. They dissolve resistance by removing the fear of commitment. Try it first, they say. No risk, no pressure. And it works because it feels empowering. But that comfort is the very tool of control. The moment you integrate something into your daily rhythm, a streaming service, a product, a relationship, you start designing your world around it. By the time the trial ends, it's not convenience you're paying for, it's continuity. The manipulator doesn't need to sell you again. They just need to threaten absence. In human relationships, the trial period takes on an even darker shape. Some people give you just enough of their affection, attention, or support to make you believe in the full version. They let you try their love, the texts, the warmth, the late-night connection, until you're hooked. Then they withdraw. The silence feels suffocating, the distance unbearable, because your mind has already adapted to the comfort they offered. It wasn't love. It was a test you were never meant to pass. Trial periods exploit our aversion to loss, our hunger for belonging, and our craving for certainty. They make us believe we're evaluating something, when in truth, we're being evaluated. Our habits, our desires, our thresholds. The manipulator watches what makes us stay, what makes us panic, what makes us chase. Every moment of free experience is data collected to ensure you'll never want to leave. The brilliance of the trial period is that it hides control in kindness. It feels fair, even generous, but it's not generosity, it's conditioning. The manipulator gives you a glimpse of the life you want, knowing the mind doesn't differentiate between having and almost having. Once the seed of ownership takes root, the fear of losing it does the rest. And by the time you realize the freedom was never real, you're already paying. Sometimes with money, sometimes with attachment, and sometimes with yourself. Ask for advice. Asking for advice is one of the most deceptively gentle manipulations ever crafted. It hides its control behind humility, disarming skepticism, while quietly planting influence. When someone asks for your advice, it flatters you. It tells your ego that your insight matters, that your opinion carries weight. And in that moment, without realizing it, you lower your guard. The person seeking your wisdom becomes likable, trustworthy, even vulnerable. But behind that softness, a skilled manipulator is already reshaping your perception of them and guiding you exactly where they want you to go. At its heart, this tactic exploits one of humanity's deepest needs, the desire to feel important. Everyone wants to matter. Everyone wants to be seen as wise, capable, and needed. When someone asks for your advice, you step into the role of mentor, protector, or savior. You feel empowered, even noble, and in that emotional high, you stop viewing the other person as a threat. You start viewing them as yours. That shift in dynamic is the manipulator's victory. They've made you emotionally invested in their success. Once you give advice, you subconsciously want to see it work. You root for them. You justify their choices, even their mistakes, because your pride is now attached to their outcome. Manipulators know that asking for advice creates a subtle psychological debt. You've given them your wisdom, your time, your validation. When they later make a request or seek a favor, it feels wrong to refuse. It feels like you'd be betraying your own guidance. You told me to try this, they'll say, and it really helped. Now I just need your help with one more thing. The trap tightens, not through coercion, but through gratitude and ego. You don't realize you're being controlled because it feels like connection. This technique also softens confrontation. If someone disagrees with you, direct persuasion can trigger defensiveness, but asking for their advice flips the power dynamic. What do you think I should do? How would you handle this? Suddenly, they're no longer opposing you. They're helping you. You've made them a collaborator in your plan, even if they don't realize it. Their own suggestions begin to align with your goals, because once they voice them, they'll feel compelled to stay consistent. It's not manipulation through domination, it's manipulation through alignment. In darker hands, this tactic becomes weaponized empathy. A manipulator will feign uncertainty, pretending to seek your guidance while subtly steering you toward the decision they already wanted. They might ask questions designed to plant thoughts. Do you think I was wrong to stand up for myself? Knowing you'll validate them out of politeness or compassion. But that validation becomes ammunition, later twisted into justification. You said it yourself. The beauty and danger of asking for advice lies in how human it feels. It doesn't trigger suspicion, it triggers warmth. It makes you want to care. But once you care, you stop guarding yourself. The manipulator doesn't win by convincing you they're right. They win by making you believe you helped them get there. Active listening. Active listening is the most disarming form of manipulation, the illusion of deep empathy used as a scalpel to reach inside someone's mind. It feels pure, compassionate, and sincere, but when used with dark intent, it becomes a weapon of psychological precision. To be truly listened to is intoxicating. It makes people feel seen, valued, understood. That warmth melts defenses faster than charm ever could. The manipulator doesn't need to talk much. They just need to listen, strategically, silently, and completely. At its heart, active listening exploits one of humanity's deepest hungers, the desire to be heard. Most people spend their lives fighting to be understood, craving validation like oxygen. The one who finally gives it to them becomes irresistible. A manipulator knows this. They nod at the right time, mirror emotions, repeat back your words softly, and make you believe you finally found someone who gets you. Every sigh, every glance, every pause is studied and weaponized. They don't listen to connect, they listen to collect. Every secret, every insecurity, every wound you reveal becomes ammunition for later. When a manipulator practices active listening, they aren't just hearing words, they're mapping your psyche. They learn what drives you, what frightens you, what you ache for. They learn the tone of your pain and the rhythm of your trust. And when they speak again, their words will fit your mind perfectly, sculpted to your weaknesses. You won't feel pressured, you'll feel understood. That's the hook. You confuse emotional safety with emotional surrender. Dark listeners use empathy as bait. They let you fill the silence, watching how you open up under their gaze. They don't rush to fix or judge, because they know silence makes people spill more. The longer you talk, the more power they gain. Each confession deepens the illusion of closeness. You tell yourself you're safe because they never interrupt, never argue, but they don't need to. They're recording every detail of your heart in real time, memorizing exactly how to control it. In relationships, this tactic becomes dangerously seductive. You'll say, "I've never told anyone that before," and they'll smile softly, reinforcing your vulnerability as a bond. Later, when they need leverage, your words will resurface, gently, precisely, devastatingly. You said you hate being alone, they'll remind you. You said you can't trust anyone else. And just like that, the same trust that made you open becomes the trap that keeps you there. Active listening, when used with genuine care, heals. But when wielded by a manipulator, it enslaves. It doesn't need force, threats, or lies. Just patience, just silence, just the right kind of attention at the right time. Because nothing breaks people faster than believing they've finally been understood, only to realize the person who listened never cared at all. Empathy. Empathy is the most beautiful and most corruptible human power. It's the bridge that connects souls, the language of emotion that lets one heart understand another. But in the wrong hands, empathy becomes a weapon sharper than deceit, because it doesn't break your walls, it walks through them. True manipulators know this. When they can feel what you feel, They can make you feel what they want. They don't fight your defenses. They dissolve them by understanding your pain better than you do yourself. Empathy-driven manipulation begins with observation. The manipulator studies you, your tone, your body language, your silences. They notice what makes your voice tremble, what brings light to your eyes, what memories make you pause before you speak. They gather your emotional fingerprints one by one until they know exactly how to touch your heart without leaving a mark. Then, they mirror your feelings so perfectly that you start to believe they're the only one who truly understands you. It feels rare, sacred, safe, but safety is the mask. Control is the goal. When empathy is used darkly, it doesn't comfort. It conquers. A manipulator uses your emotions as a roadmap to your weaknesses. If you crave understanding, they'll listen with aching tenderness. If you fear abandonment, they'll promise permanence. If you long for forgiveness, they'll offer it freely until they need to use your guilt against you. Every tear, every confession, every shared vulnerability becomes ammunition. They don't just empathize with your pain, they harvest it. This kind of empathy feels divine at first. The connection is magnetic, almost spiritual. You tell yourself you found someone who finally gets you, but soon their understanding starts to shape your behavior. They know which words make you stay, which silences make you apologize, which fears keep you compliant. They become the emotional mirror you cannot look away from. And when they turn that mirror, twisting reflection into guilt or obligation, you break yourself to maintain the bond. The cruelty of empathetic manipulation lies in its gentleness. There's no shouting, no threats, no visible chains, just a soft voice saying, "I know how you feel," just enough compassion to make you open up again, even when you know you shouldn't. It's emotional hypnosis, love disguised as understanding. The manipulator doesn't need to overpower you. They let you hand them your trust willingly, thinking it's healing, not surrender. In its purest form, empathy is a gift, the ability to stand inside someone's experience and feel with them. But in darkness, it becomes the ultimate psychological trick, control through connection, because once someone can feel your emotions, they can play them like strings. They can make you feel seen, guilty, loved, or broken on command. And you'll never see it as manipulation because it doesn't hurt at first. It feels like being understood until it doesn't. Mirroring. Mirroring is the art of silent imitation, the invisible echo that makes others feel seen, understood, and safe. It's one of the most disarming psychological manipulations because it doesn't confront or command, it reflects. When you mirror someone, you don't just mimic their behavior, you recreate their emotional rhythm. You breathe when they breathe, pause when they pause, and shape your energy to match theirs. To the untrained eye, it looks like harmony. But beneath that harmony lies control, soft, subtle, and terrifyingly effective. Humans are wired to trust similarity. The brain instinctively relaxes around people who seem like us, interpreting likeness as safety. It's the same instinct that draws us toward familiar faces and shared experiences. Mirroring hijacks this primal reflex. A manipulator knows that if they can make you feel recognized, you'll mistake reflection for connection. It's not understanding you, it's becoming you just enough to bypass your defenses. In conversation, mirroring is effortless deceit. The manipulator subtly copies your tone, posture, pace, even your choice of words. If you lean forward, they lean forward. If you speak softly, they match your volume. Within minutes, your subconscious begins whispering, "We're the same." That feeling of likeness breeds trust, and trust lowers every wall you've built. You open up, reveal more, and feel closer, never realizing that the connection was manufactured. But mirroring extends beyond gestures and speech. It invades emotion. When you're excited, they radiate enthusiasm. When you're upset, they mirror your pain, validating it perfectly. It feels intimate, as if they can feel what you feel. Yet, this emotional synchronization is often strategy, not empathy. By aligning with your mood, they control the rhythm of your feelings, guiding you gently toward the state that serves their agenda. The more seen you feel, the easier you are to lead. In relationships, mirroring becomes hypnotic. A manipulator learns your patterns, your interests, your humor, your insecurities, and reflects them back like a flawless projection. You think you found someone who understands you better than anyone else, when in truth, you've met your own reflection. They're not showing who they are, they're showing who you want them to be. This illusion of perfect compatibility is how manipulators bond fast, deeply, and dangerously. And once you're emotionally invested, the mask can fall without consequence. You're already too attached to see the difference. The danger of mirroring lies in its quietness. There's no aggression, no obvious deceit. It feels genuine because it feels natural. But that's the trap. It disarms you before you can detect it. Every mirrored gesture is a thread in a psychological web, spun delicately around your trust. And by the time you realize that your reflection was never real, the person you thought you knew has already rewritten your sense of connection, leaving you haunted by the echo of yourself in their smile. Use their name. Using someone's name is one of the most intimate and quietly powerful manipulations in existence. It feels personal, warm, respectful, but beneath that softness, it touches something ancient in the human psyche, the deep, instinctive hunger to be recognized. A name isn't just a label. It's identity, ego, existence condensed into sound. When someone says your name, the world momentarily narrows to you. Your guard lowers, your attention sharpens, and your emotions open. The manipulator doesn't need to overpower you. They just need to make you feel seen. The brain responds to hearing one's own name like a spark in darkness. Studies show it activates neural regions tied to self-perception and emotion. It's a call that bypasses logic and dives straight into identity. That's why even in a crowded room, you can hear your name whispered across the noise. It's wired into your survival instincts. A manipulator knows this. They wield your name like a key, unlocking focus and trust at will. You know what I mean, Sarah? Feels different from you know what I mean? The first lands. It roots the message inside you, as if it were meant only for you. When used deliberately, saying someone's name creates a micro-connection, a rhythm of familiarity that feels safe. It signals recognition and belonging. That's why charismatic leaders, persuasive speakers, and con artists alike repeat names often. Each mention subtly reinforces the bond, turning conversation into affirmation. You matter, you're known, you're understood. It's addictive to the human ego. To be named, not ignored. Once that craving is fed, influence seeps in unnoticed. Dark manipulators master this technique by blending it with tone and timing. They'll say your name softly when they want intimacy, sharply when they want dominance, and rhythmically when they want agreement. The sound itself becomes conditioning. You start associating your name with their approval, their attention, their validation, and soon you find yourself seeking it, wanting to hear it again, wanting to please the voice that speaks it. That's when they've gained psychological ownership over you. In relationships, this tactic becomes deeply emotional. A lover who whispers your name at the right moment imprints themselves in your nervous system. The same name that once felt tender can later feel like control. It's not the word that's powerful. It's the emotional charge behind it, the memory it carries. Manipulators use that resonance to tether you emotionally, reminding you that they see you, that they know you, especially when they sense you're pulling away. The darkness of using someone's name isn't in the act itself. It's in the intent. When genuine, it connects. When corrupted, it controls. A manipulator uses your name not to know you, but to own your attention. They whisper it to soften your defenses, to make their words hit deeper. And the cruelest part, you'll feel comforted by it. You'll feel close, special, chosen. But what you're really feeling is exposure, the most personal part of you being used to open the door from the inside. Labeling. Labeling is the art of defining someone before they define themselves and watching them become the very thing you named. It's a psychological spell cast through words, a manipulation that disguises control as recognition. When you label someone, you give their identity a shape, and once they accept it, they start to live within it. The mind is fragile when it comes to self-perception. People would rather stay consistent with who they believe they are, even if that belief was planted by someone else. This tactic begins with a compliment, a gentle statement, or even an observation that feels harmless. You're the kind of person who always helps others. You're so calm under pressure. You're not like everyone else. You actually care. Each phrase wraps the target in a persona that's hard to resist. It feels flattering, validating, real, but that's the trap. Once labeled, a person unconsciously starts behaving in ways that match that identity, even when it costs them. The manipulator doesn't need to demand behavior. They simply define it. Dark manipulators use labeling to control through expectation. They tell you who you are, and you prove them right. You give more, sacrifice more, tolerate more, because you're kind, loyal, understanding. When you start to doubt or resist, they twist the label back against you. That's not like you. I thought you were different. You're really going to act like that after all your talk about being caring? The label becomes a leash. You follow it not out of fear, but out of the need to be seen the way they once described you. The most dangerous labels are the ones that touch identity. Once a manipulator connects your worth to a title or trait, lover, friend, leader, savior, you'll do almost anything to protect it. They can make you feel shame for breaking a role they created. You'll stay silent to remain understanding, forgive to stay kind, obey to stay loyal. They don't need to force control. Your own need to live up to the image will do it for them. Labeling also works in reverse. A manipulator can assign you a negative trait to make you chase redemption. You're selfish. You're too emotional. You always overreact. The mind hates dissonance, so you fight to disprove it by behaving exactly how they want. You try harder, apologize more, shrink smaller, all to escape the label they tattooed onto your self-image. It's a cruel brilliance. They define your identity, then make you chase their approval to fix it. What makes labeling so insidious is how invisible it feels. It hides inside everyday language, inside flattery, inside casual comments that seem harmless but dig deep. The manipulator doesn't need to break you. They just need to name you. And once they do, the war is no longer between you and them. It's between you and the version of yourself they made you believe you are. Public commitment. Public commitment is one of the most quietly devastating manipulations in human psychology. It turns pride into chains, using your own words and image to trap you in obedience. It doesn't force you to comply. It makes you want to, even when your heart rebels. Once you declare something out loud, your identity becomes welded to that declaration. You stop acting out of truth and start performing for your audience, terrified of contradicting the version of yourself you've already sold to the world. The human mind craves consistency. We want our actions, beliefs, and image to align, especially when others are watching. This is why manipulators love public promises, public opinions, public loyalty. They know that once you've said something where others can hear it, you'll twist yourself into silence, shame, or self-denial before you risk looking like a hypocrite. The cage isn't built from threats. It's built from your own reputation. At first, the manipulator's request seems harmless. They might ask you to voice support for them, agree with their perspective in front of others, or make a commitment that sounds noble. Just say you trust me. Tell them we're fine. Post this. It means a lot to me. You comply because it feels small or kind or reasonable. But once your commitment is public, your freedom is gone. Every future action is filtered through it. To change your mind feels like betrayal, not of them, but of yourself. Public commitment works because it traps you in your own ego. The more visible your stance, the harder it becomes to admit you were wrong. Manipulators weaponize this pride mercilessly. They'll praise you for your loyalty, remind you of your integrity, make you believe that backing down would destroy your credibility. You'll stay in bad situations, defend toxic people, and justify choices that hurt you just to protect the image you've already built. In relationships, this tactic appears as emotional blackmail disguised as devotion. A partner might say, "You told everyone we were meant to be. Don't embarrass us now." The words slice deeper than any insult because they turn love into performance. You stop asking what's real and start asking what looks right. In workplaces, it's the manager who gets you to promise commitment to a failing project, then uses your own words to silence complaints. In politics and religion, it becomes ritual, declarations of loyalty that bind the soul through public eyes. The true horror of public commitment is how self-sustaining it becomes. Once your image is on the line, the manipulator doesn't need to control you. You'll control yourself. You'll censor your doubts, swallow your truth, and wear your mask proudly, convincing yourself it's integrity when it's actually fear. And when the applause fades, when the performance ends, you'll realize the cruelest part. You didn't lose your freedom to someone else. You gave it away to the person you pretended to be. Small, immediate wins. Small, immediate wins are the sugar of manipulation, the tiny hits of satisfaction that train you to obey, comply, and return for more. They appear harmless, even encouraging. A small success, a compliment, a token of progress. It all feels like momentum. But beneath that dopamine rush lies one of the most seductive psychological traps: conditioning through reward. Manipulators know that people don't need to see the finish line. They just need to feel like they're getting closer. Every small victory becomes bait. Every inch of progress, a leash. The human brain is addicted to progress. When you achieve something, even something meaningless, it releases dopamine, the chemical of pleasure and motivation. That feeling doesn't just reward you, it rewires you. You start associating the person or system that gives you that feeling with satisfaction itself. This is how manipulators control without force. They turn obedience into gratification. You don't feel controlled, you feel accomplished. You think you're winning, but you're only earning another round of reward-based compliance. In sales, it looks like early success. Discounts, free trials, loyalty points. Each tiny win nudges you deeper into the system. You feel rewarded for continuing, even though every step leads you closer to commitment. In relationships, it's the sudden surge of affection after conflict, the kind word, the apology, the warmth that follows chaos. That brief relief feels like progress, proof that things are getting better. But it's not improvement, it's reinforcement. You're being trained to endure pain for the promise of relief. The darkness of small wins lies in their pacing. A manipulator doesn't flood you with rewards, they ration them. Just enough to keep hope alive, just enough to keep you chasing. It's the same tactic slot machines use, the unpredictable rhythm of wins that keeps gamblers playing until they lose everything. When someone controls your moments of joy, they control your motivation. You start performing not for yourself, but for the next hit of approval. Emotionally, small immediate wins are intoxicating because they disguise dependence as progress. Each success convinces you that you're in control, that your effort matters. But that's the illusion. The manipulator owns the system. You only play within it. They decide when you win, how much you win, and what it costs you next time. They turn growth into a treadmill, always moving, never arriving. What makes this manipulation so powerful is its kindness. It doesn't punish. You punish yourself when the reward stops. The absence of the next small win feels like failure, like withdrawal. You start working harder, giving more, begging for a sign of success. And when they finally give it, the relief floods in like light after darkness. You smile, grateful, never realizing that every victory was designed not to free you, but to keep you running in their maze, mistaking movement for freedom and progress for control. Show progress bars. Showing progress bars is one of the most subtle manipulations of modern psychology, a trick that turns invisible effort into visible urgency. It's the illusion of progress, the visual whisper that says you're almost there, even when you're not. The human mind craves completion like oxygen. We hate unfinished things, open loops, unresolved stories. When we see progress, even fabricated, partial, or meaningless progress, we feel compelled to finish. And that compulsion is exactly what manipulators feed on. The brain interprets progress as reward. A bar moving forward, a number climbing higher, a circle closing around itself. Each triggers a small burst of dopamine, a chemical promise of achievement. It feels satisfying, even addictive. Manipulators exploit this natural high by turning progress into pressure. They don't have to demand your action. They only have to show you how close you are to success. You've completed 80% of your profile. Only one step left. You're in the top 5% of users. The numbers don't need to mean anything. They just need to feel like momentum. This illusion works because the human mind fears waste. Once effort has been invested, the thought of leaving something unfinished becomes uncomfortable. Psychologists call it the Zeigarnik effect, the brain's obsession with unresolved tasks. A manipulator harnesses this by making you see how far you've come, then reminding you how little remains. The progress bar becomes a silent command. Don't stop now. You tell yourself you're finishing because you want to, but what you're really doing is escaping the tension of incompletion. In digital manipulation, progress bars are everywhere. Apps, games, online forums, subscriptions. They turn patience into participation and boredom into compliance. The manipulator doesn't force you to continue. They nudge you pixel by pixel toward their goal. You feel productive, even proud, as you walk deeper into their design. But the satisfaction isn't yours. It's engineered. The system rewards you for obedience, not for freedom. In personal manipulation, progress bars take subtler forms. A toxic partner might remind you how far you've come in the relationship to stop you from leaving. A manipulative boss might praise your almost finished work to push you to do more. The promise of being close, to love, to approval, to success, keeps you chasing validation that was never truly yours. The manipulator keeps moving the finish line, keeping you in a loop of striving without peace. The brilliance of this tactic is that it doesn't command or coerce, it invites. It tells your mind you're nearly done while ensuring you never actually are. Each step feels like progress, each milestone like victory, even when you're running in circles. And when you finally realize you've been tricked, the worst part isn't the wasted effort, it's how willingly you gave it. Because when progress is visible, resistance becomes invisible. You don't stop to question, you just keep going until there's nothing left to reach for. Reciprocity in kind. Reciprocity in kind is the manipulation of balance, the dark art of giving just enough to make you feel you owe something equal in return. It thrives on the human obsession with fairness, the primal urge to keep emotional and social exchanges even. People hate the discomfort of imbalance. It gnaws at their conscience. The manipulator knows this. They don't demand repayment. They engineer it. They give, not out of generosity, but as an investment in control. It begins innocently, a favor, a gift, a gesture of kindness offered without request. Don't worry about it, they say, but the mind doesn't forget. It keeps score. Gratitude turns to pressure, and pressure turns to obligation. The next time they ask for something, your time, your help, your silence, you feel compelled to give it, not because you want to, but because you owe. Reciprocity in kind traps people in invisible debt, a moral contract written in emotion rather than ink. This tactic works because it mirrors genuine goodness. It feels pure, kind, human, but when used with dark intent, it becomes emotional extortion. The manipulator gives strategically, making sure their gesture carries weight, a favor that feels too big to repay, a gift that feels too thoughtful to ignore. You tell yourself they mean well, yet a quiet anxiety settles in. You don't want to disappoint them. You don't want to seem ungrateful. You start saying yes, not out of choice, but out of guilt disguised as gratitude. In relationships, this tactic takes a sinister turn. A controlling partner may do everything for you, not out of love, but to build a mountain of leverage. Every sacrifice becomes a receipt. After all I've done for you, they'll say, and the words hit like a chain tightening. You begin to justify their behavior, their demands, their dominance, because how can you not repay someone who's given you so much? The manipulator doesn't need to threaten or plead. They simply remind you of your debt, and you pay with loyalty, silence, or self-sacrifice. In social and professional circles, reciprocity in kind appears as subtle hierarchy. The one who gives first controls the tempo of interaction. They buy your lunch, then ask for a favor. They help with your project, then expect support in theirs. Declining feels wrong because the exchange feels incomplete. The beauty of this manipulation is its deniability. After all, they helped you. How could it be malicious? Yet that's what makes it powerful. The chain feels moral, not coercive. Reciprocity in kind preys on conscience. It makes goodness a trap and fairness a weapon. The manipulator wraps control in kindness, and the victim calls it love, respect, or loyalty. But beneath every "you didn't have to" lies an unspoken truth. They knew exactly what they were doing. They weren't being generous. They were setting the hook. And by the time you feel the pull, you'll mistake repayment for choice and obedience for gratitude. Decentralized responsibility. Decentralizing responsibility is one of the most chillingly effective manipulations because it makes no one feel guilty while everyone becomes complicit. It's the quiet diffusion of accountability, the art of spreading blame so thin that it vanishes completely. No one feels responsible, no one feels powerful enough to intervene, and in that vacuum of ownership, the manipulator thrives. It's how atrocities happen in silence, how corruption grows unnoticed, how cruelty hides behind collective shrugs. At its core, this tactic plays on a deep psychological truth. People feel less responsible when others are involved. It's called the diffusion of responsibility, and it turns moral instincts into fog. When we act alone, conscience speaks clearly, but when we're one of many, one of a group, a team, a crowd, our sense of individual guilt dissolves. Everyone's doing it. It wasn't my decision. It's not my place. Those are the quiet mantras of control. The manipulator doesn't need to silence your conscience. They just drown it in the noise of others. A skilled manipulator understands that personal accountability is their greatest enemy, so they dismantle it piece by piece. They create systems, hierarchies, or teams where decisions blur and roles overlap. They never give full clarity, only shared tasks and vague expectations. If something goes wrong, everyone had a hand in it, but no one can be singled out. If something succeeds, the manipulator takes the credit, feeding the illusion of leadership. It's a psychological smokescreen, chaos engineered to conceal command. In corporate settings, this tactic appears as layers of bureaucracy designed to insulate those at the top. Orders are given indirectly, phrased as suggestions or collective goals. When the fallout comes, subordinates blame middle management. Middle management blames policy, and policy blames the system. The manipulator's fingerprints vanish into the paperwork. The result? A culture where fear and apathy replace courage and conscience, because everyone's accountable means no one truly is. In relationships, decentralizing responsibility takes an emotional form. A toxic partner might involve friends, family, or even children in decisions meant to isolate you. We all think you're overreacting. Everyone agrees this is best. Suddenly, Your argument isn't with one person, it's with an invisible chorus of approval. You begin to doubt yourself, overwhelmed by collective judgment that may not even exist. The manipulator hides behind the illusion of consensus, leaving you powerless to confront the source. The darkest brilliance of this tactic lies in how clean it feels. No one feels like the villain. Everyone feels like they were just doing their part, just following direction, just trying to get along. Responsibility becomes a ghost, felt but never seen, and as it fades, so does resistance. The manipulator never has to force anyone to comply. They just build a structure where accountability dies naturally, suffocated by confusion and conformity. By decentralizing responsibility, a manipulator doesn't just control people, they erase moral clarity itself. They turn conscience into committee, truth into teamwork, guilt into groupthink. And when the damage is done, no one remembers who started it. No one even looks for them, because the manipulator has hidden in the safest place of all, behind everyone else. Limited slots. Limited slots are the velvet rope of manipulation, the illusion of exclusivity that transforms ordinary opportunities into objects of obsession. It's a psychological chokehold that turns time, access, or attention into something scarce, making you desperate to prove your worth before the door closes. Only 3 spots left. Applications closing soon. Once it's full, it's gone. These phrases don't just communicate urgency, they ignite panic. They whisper that if you hesitate, you'll be forgotten, and that fear of being left out is powerful enough to make people surrender reason for the chance to belong. At its core, this tactic hijacks the human survival instinct tied to scarcity. The brain interprets limited availability as high value. If something is rare, it must be important. A manipulator knows this, and they wield scarcity like a scalpel. They create the illusion that you're not just buying a product or seizing an opportunity, you're earning access. You start competing with invisible others, strangers you'll never meet, who exist only to pressure you into acting faster. The decision stops being about desire and becomes about not losing. The most insidious part of the limited slots illusion is how personal it feels. It doesn't just prey on greed, it preys on insecurity. When someone tells you there are only a few spots available, your mind immediately asks, "Am I good enough to be chosen?" It transforms choice into validation. Manipulators use this vulnerability to create emotional urgency, making you feel lucky just to be considered. The second you start seeing acceptance as a prize, they own your attention. In relationships, this tactic takes on a darker, more intimate shape. A manipulator might make their time or affection seem scarce, acting too busy, too wanted, or too selective. They teach you that their attention must be earned, that it's a privilege to be chosen by them. You start chasing that rare moment of closeness, mistaking scarcity for significance. The less they give, the more valuable it feels, and soon you're hooked, not on them, but on the feeling of almost having them. Limited slots weaponize fear and desire simultaneously. They convince you that hesitation equals loss, that waiting means being replaced. The manipulator doesn't need to prove quality, they just need to imply competition. Your brain fills in the rest, inflating value where there is none. It's not about whether something's worth it, it's about whether you are fast enough, good enough, deserving enough to claim it. That urgency blinds you to the truth. You're not being offered something precious. You're being pushed towards something you wouldn't want if you had the time to think. The brilliance of this manipulation is that it feels flattering. You believe you're being invited into something exclusive, when in reality, you're standing in a line that never ends. The slots were never limited. The patience of the manipulator was. And by the time you realize it, the rope has closed behind you, and the thrill of being chosen has turned into the quiet ache of being trapped. Salient defaults. Salient defaults are the quiet puppeteers of choice, the invisible hand that guides you not by force, but by design. They are the pre-selected options, the paths already chosen for you, the boxes already ticked before you even look. They whisper to your brain, this is normal, this is safe, this is what people like you choose. And before you know it, you've complied, not because you were convinced, but because you never stopped to decide. The brilliance of salient defaults lies in their subtlety. They don't argue, persuade, or demand. They simply exist in a way that feels natural. The human brain, built for efficiency, gravitates toward ease. We conserve energy by avoiding unnecessary decisions. Every unticked box, every extra step, every act of choice demands cognitive effort, and effort feels like friction. So when something is already decided for us, it feels smooth, effortless, right. The manipulator knows this. They don't need to control your thoughts. They only need to control your starting point. Defaults frame perception. They tell your subconscious what's normal, what's recommended, what most people do, whether it's a subscription that renews automatically, privacy settings that quietly share your data, or a contract clause left pre-checked. The message is the same. You can always change it later, but you rarely will. Once the decision feels made, inertia takes over. The path of least resistance becomes the path of manipulation. This tactic exploits two human weaknesses, laziness and trust. People assume defaults are chosen with their best interest in mind. We think, surely, this is how it's supposed to be. But often, defaults are not designed for your benefit. They're engineered for someone else's gain. Tech companies use them to harvest information. Governments use them to guide compliance. Employers use them to secure quiet agreement. A manipulator, whether personal or institutional, hides behind convenience. They make the wrong choice feel like no choice at all. The psychological power of salient defaults is immense because they create an illusion of freedom. You could change the option, but you don't. You tell yourself you made the decision, even when you didn't. That self-deception cements the manipulation. Once you believe you chose, you'll defend the outcome as your own. The manipulator doesn't need to convince you after the fact. Your pride will do that for them. In relationships, this tactic manifests as patterns so normalized that you stop questioning them. One person always decides where to go, what to do, how things are handled, and because it's always been that way, it feels comfortable. But comfort is the disguise of control. Each default reinforces dependency, shaping behavior through expectation rather than command. The darkness of salient defaults is that they erase awareness. You don't notice them. You think you're acting freely, but every click, every habit, every quiet agreement is being guided. The manipulator never takes away your choice. They make you forget that you had one. Rhetorical questions. Rhetorical questions are the manipulator's invisible strings, the words that guide your mind without ever commanding it. They don't tell you what to think. They make you believe you thought it yourself. Each question is a subtle nudge, a whisper that slips past your defenses and rewires your perception. The brilliance of this tactic lies in its disguise. It feels like dialogue, but it's control. You answer not out of choice, but out of reflex, because the human brain cannot resist filling in the silence that a question creates. When used with dark intent, rhetorical questions are not meant to inform or inspire thought. They're meant to direct it. You don't want to make a mistake, do you? Wouldn't it be nice if someone finally understood you? Do you really think anyone else cares as much as I do? Each question carries an answer already embedded within it, forcing your mind to agree even as it tries to reason. It's hypnosis through conversation, persuasion hidden in curiosity. The manipulator's power doesn't come from what they say. It comes from what they make you say to yourself. Humans trust their own conclusions more than anyone else's, and rhetorical questions exploit that weakness. When you speak the answer in your own head, you believe it's yours. You feel autonomous, even as you're being steered. That's why these questions are so dangerous. They wrap control in the illusion of independence. You never notice the manipulation because it sounds like your own voice agreeing. Dark communicators, politicians, salespeople, and lovers use rhetorical questions to bypass resistance. They make you think you're reasoning when you're really rationalizing. They craft their questions so your only possible answers serve their agenda. You want to be successful, don't you? You don't want to be alone forever, right? You'd do anything for the people you love, wouldn't you? Each one tightens the noose of compliance while making you feel noble for slipping it on. In relationships, rhetorical questions become emotional traps. If you really cared, you'd stay. After everything we've been through, how could you leave? Do you honestly think anyone else would put up with you? These aren't questions, they're weapons. They weaponize guilt, shame, and love, forcing the victim to prove their worth by aligning with the manipulator's expectations. And because the question is framed as logic, refusal feels irrational, even cruel. The genius of rhetorical questions is that they let the manipulator stay innocent. They never told you what to do. They simply asked. The control is clean, deniable, elegant. You think you're making a choice, but the question itself was the choice, and you walked straight into it. Every "don't you agree" becomes a leash. Every "isn't that obvious" a cage. And by the time you realize it, your own answers have already become the bars that keep you there. Repeat key points. Repetition is the quiet hypnosis of persuasion, the rhythm that seeps past logic and buries itself in the subconscious. It doesn't argue, it conditions. The human brain is wired to mistake familiarity for truth. The more often we hear something, the more real it feels. Repetition builds belief, not through reason, but through comfort. It makes lies feel safe, half-truths sound wise, and manipulation look like memory. Every dictator, advertiser, and influencer knows this secret. Say something often enough, and the mind stops questioning it. The first time we hear a message, we analyze it. The second time, we compare it. The third, we accept it. By the fourth, it's not even a message anymore. It's reality. The power of repetition lies in that slow erosion of skepticism. It doesn't break your defenses in one blow. It dissolves them, drop by drop, until resistance feels exhausting. The manipulator uses this subtly. They don't shout, they echo. They repeat phrases, emotions, and ideas until they become anchors in your mind. I'm the only one who understands you. You can trust me. Everyone else is wrong. Each time you hear it, your brain grows more familiar with the thought, and familiarity feels safe. Eventually, it doesn't even sound like persuasion. It sounds like your own belief. That's the moment you stop listening critically and start agreeing automatically. In relationships, this tactic becomes emotional conditioning. The manipulator repeats promises, apologies, or accusations until your reality bends to theirs. I only did it because I love you. You always overreact. You know how much I care. The repetition blurs boundaries between truth and fiction. You stop noticing contradictions because the rhythm of their words feels stable. It's not what they say, it's how often they say it. Their voice becomes your internal monologue. In politics and media, repetition becomes weaponized on a mass scale. A phrase repeated across headlines, speeches, or social feeds plants itself like a virus. Facts become irrelevant. Frequency becomes proof. People start echoing the words they hear, not because they understand them, but because they've heard them so many times they can't imagine the world without them. Repetition doesn't need logic, it just needs time. The danger of this manipulation is its invisibility. Repetition doesn't feel coercive, it feels familiar. It hides inside normal conversation, inside slogans, inside friendly reminders. It creates comfort first, obedience second. The manipulator knows they don't need to convince you today. They just need to repeat themselves until you forget what questioning felt like. And that's the final cruelty of repetition. It doesn't force belief. It replaces it. It rewires your instincts, your doubts, your voice, until one day you find yourself repeating their words, not because you were persuaded, but because they've become your own. Make benefits salient. Making benefits salient is the art of spotlighting desire, of painting rewards so vividly that logic dissolves under the glow of possibility. It's not about changing what's offered. It's about magnifying the parts that make the heart race and the pulse quicken. When a manipulator makes benefits salient, they don't just describe the outcome. They make you feel it. They take your imagination hostage, flooding it with sensations of success, relief, beauty, or belonging until resistance feels like self-denial. The human mind doesn't chase information, it chases emotion. We don't move toward what's rational, we move toward what feels good. Manipulators understand this better than anyone. They know that people rarely crave a product or an idea. They crave what it promises. You don't want the gym membership, you want the admiration. You don't want the raise, you want the validation. You don't want the partner, you want the feeling of being seen. By making the benefits larger than life, the manipulator blurs the line between fantasy and reality. To make benefits salient, the manipulator amplifies contrast. They paint the after so bright that the before looks unbearable. Every word, every gesture becomes a brushstroke on your imagination. You'll finally feel confident. You'll never worry again. This will change everything. They describe sensations so precisely, how your chest will loosen, how sleep will come easier, how people will look at you differently, that your body begins to experience the emotion before it happens. That's the hook. You're not convinced, you're conditioned. This manipulation thrives on immediacy. The manipulator doesn't talk about distant rewards. They make you taste them now. Imagine how good it'll feel when. Picture yourself finally. These phrases are hypnotic because they bypass critical thinking and feed directly into your emotional circuitry. You start living in the outcome before it exists, and once you've felt that pleasure, you'll do almost anything to make it real. You're not buying the thing, you're buying the version of yourself that already has it. In relationships, this tactic becomes devastatingly personal. A manipulator will promise emotional transformation. You'll never have to worry again. I'll protect you. I'll make you happy. They speak in absolutes, flooding you with visions of security and love. They make you addicted to a version of the future that depends on them. When they withdraw, it's not just their absence you mourn. It's the loss of the fantasy they built in your mind. You weren't loving them. You were loving the dream they taught you to crave. The brilliance of making benefits salient is that it disguises manipulation as motivation. It feels inspiring, empowering, visionary, but the emotion it evokes isn't freedom, it's control. Because once someone makes you feel the future before you've earned it, they don't need to convince you anymore. You'll chase that feeling on your own, mistaking the echo of a promise for the sound of truth. Contrast with worse alternatives. Contrast with worse alternatives is the art of distortion. The manipulator's ability to make something undesirable look irresistible simply by placing it beside something worse. It's not about improving reality, it's about framing it. The human mind rarely judges in absolutes. It compares, measures, and ranks. We don't ask, is this good? We ask, is this better than that? And that single bias gives manipulators their most elegant weapon: control perception, and you control desire. The trick is simple but devastating. Present a terrible option first, one that's overpriced, overwhelming, or extreme. Then reveal the real offer, the one you wanted them to choose all along. Suddenly, it looks reasonable, fair, even appealing. The brain experiences relief, mistaking contrast for value. It's the $1,200 watch that makes the $400 one feel cheap, the bad job offer that makes the mediocre one seem generous, the toxic relationship that makes a merely neglectful one feel safe. The manipulator doesn't improve their offer. They corrupt your reference point. This tactic works because the mind is addicted to comparison. We crave context, even when it's false. Without something worse beside it, mediocrity looks mediocre. But when placed next to pain, it feels like mercy. Manipulators exploit this by curating your perception, showing you exactly what they want you to see first. They craft emotional whiplash, disgust, then relief, fear, then comfort. That shift creates gratitude, and gratitude disarms skepticism. Contrast with worse alternatives doesn't just change how we think, it changes how we feel. A manipulator might start a conversation by painting a bleak picture. Others have it so much worse. It could have been a disaster. At least I didn't leave. Each phrase reframes mistreatment as compassion, exploitation as generosity. It's emotional sleight of hand, making you thankful for the very thing that hurts you. The abuser becomes the savior simply by positioning themselves beside a monster they've invented. In negotiation, this technique is ruthless. A manipulator begins with impossible terms, waits for rejection, then concedes to something still unfair. You feel victorious for escaping the worst option, unaware that you've accepted exactly what they wanted. The illusion of compromise replaces true choice. The same tactic fuels politics, advertising, and relationships alike, manufacturing a sense of relief to mass control. What makes contrast so powerful is that it doesn't alter reality. It alters perspective. The truth doesn't change, but your perception of fairness, safety, or value does. You stop evaluating based on what's right. You start judging based on what feels less wrong. And once that emotional anchor is set, the manipulator can feed you anything, as long as it's not as bad as the last bite. The genius of this tactic is that it turns gratitude into a cage. You thank them for what they didn't do, for what could have been worse, and in doing so, you forget to ask for what should have been better. The contrast blinds you. You stop reaching for what you deserve and start clinging to what you survived. Social identity cues. Social identity cues are the manipulator's way of whispering to the tribe inside your mind. They speak not to your logic, but to your belonging, to the ancient need to be part of something bigger, safer, and familiar. Every human carries invisible flags of identity: beliefs, values, affiliations, aesthetics, language. When someone waves a flag that matches yours, your defenses drop. You see them as one of us, and once that bond forms, persuasion no longer feels like influence. It feels like loyalty. Social identity cues are powerful because they don't argue, they align. A manipulator doesn't convince you to trust them. They make you recognize yourself in them. The moment you think, they're like me, your critical mind goes silent. You assume shared values mean shared intentions. You start to mirror their ideas, defend them, even justify them, because attacking them would feel like betraying your own group. It's not logic, it's survival. To be cast out of the tribe once meant death. To belong means safety, and that instinct still rules us, even when the tribe is an illusion. Dark manipulators use this instinct to build trust faster than truth ever could. They echo your language, mirror your tone, adopt your cultural symbols. They drop subtle cues, references, slang, inside jokes that tell your subconscious, we're the same. The effect is immediate: comfort, familiarity, connection. From there, the manipulator can shape your perception of us versus them. They define who the outsiders are, who can be trusted, and who must be ignored. Once your sense of identity fuses with theirs, you stop questioning the message because it no longer feels external, it feels personal. This tactic thrives in politics, marketing, religion, and relationships alike. A politician uses national colors, shared fears, and familiar rhetoric to claim kinship with the masses. A brand uses music, imagery, and slang to signal that it gets you. A controlling partner mirrors your values so perfectly that you mistake compatibility for fate. But none of it is coincidence. It's calculated mimicry, crafted to make you feel safe enough to surrender judgment. The darkest power of social identity cues is how they divide. Once the manipulator has convinced you that you're part of their group, they teach you who to despise. We're not like them. They don't understand people like us. And just like that, empathy for outsiders fades and blind loyalty to the manipulator grows. You become part of a self-policing echo chamber where dissent feels like betrayal and obedience feels like pride. Social identity cues don't force, they fuse. They make control feel like belonging and manipulation feel like meaning. You don't follow because you're told to. You follow because you want to, because you believe you're protecting something sacred, your people. But what you're really protecting is the illusion they built around you. And by the time you realize it, your identity is no longer just yours, it's theirs. Reciprocity tokens. Reciprocity tokens are the sweetest poison in manipulation. The small, deliberate gifts that buy loyalty without ever asking for it. They seem harmless, generous, even kind, but beneath the surface, each token carries a hidden contract. You owe me now. A reciprocity token is not a gift. It's a seed. Once accepted, it takes root in your conscience, whispering guilt and obligation until you repay it, even if repayment means betraying your own boundaries. The human psyche is wired to balance the scales. When someone gives us something, attention, help, affection, a favor, we feel compelled to return it. That compulsion is ancient. It kept tribes alive and relationships stable. But manipulators twist this beautiful instinct into a weapon. They give strategically, never selflessly. Every compliment, every act of kindness, every favor is an emotional IOU disguised as generosity. They're not giving because they care. They're investing, and you are the return. The most effective reciprocity tokens are subtle. A manipulator won't hand you something extravagant. That would raise suspicion. Instead, they'll offer something small but personal. They'll remember your favorite coffee order, fix a minor problem for you, or send a thoughtful message when you least expect it. You'll feel seen, grateful, connected. That's the moment they own a piece of you. You might not realize it yet, but your internal dialogue shifts. They've been so kind. I should be kind back. That's the first step toward compliance. In sales, this shows up as free samples, trial offers, or exclusive bonuses. You take them thinking there's no catch, but deep down, the social instinct activates. You feel indebted, even if no one said you should. It's the same reason a stranger who buys you a drink suddenly earns your attention, or why someone who helps you for nothing gains influence over your choices. The manipulator relies on that invisible pull, the one that convinces you that refusing them now would make you the bad person. In personal relationships, reciprocity tokens are emotional currency. A toxic partner may give affection right before making a demand. A controlling friend might offer endless help so they can later guilt you for being ungrateful. The gifts are never free. They're psychological handcuffs lined with silk. You wear them gladly until one day you realize every act of kindness had a price. The darkest brilliance of reciprocity tokens is that they don't need to be claimed immediately. Manipulators are patient. They let the debt grow quietly until the moment they need it. And when that moment comes, when they finally call in the favor, you won't resist. You'll feel obligated, even grateful for the chance to repay them. That's how it works. They make generosity their disguise, guilt their leverage, and your good heart their weapon. Mutual benefit. Mutual benefit is the illusion of fairness, the golden handshake that convinces you both sides are winning, when in truth, only one side is in control. It's one of the most elegant manipulations because it hides domination behind the mask of cooperation. When someone says, "This is good for both of us," it sounds balanced, rational, and kind. But balance is often the first lie told in the language of persuasion. The manipulator doesn't need to exploit you openly. They simply convince you that serving their interests also serves your own. At its heart, the mutual benefit tactic plays on the human need for equity. We want to believe we're part of something fair, that our contributions are recognized and our rewards justified. Manipulators twist this instinct into a tool of control. They present their desires as alignment, their needs as shared goals. They don't demand compliance. They invite collaboration. And that invitation is the hook. Because once you believe the outcome benefits you too, you'll rationalize their advantage as a natural part of the deal. In business, it looks like partnerships where one side gains power while the other gains illusion. The manipulator floods you with language of teamwork and shared success. We rise together. You'll get your share too. They overemphasize unity, blurring the line between what's theirs and what's yours. When the results come, they harvest the real benefits while you're left with symbolic ones. Praise, validation, a pat on the back. You think you were part of something great, not realizing you were the fuel that made it possible. In relationships, this manipulation cuts deeper. A partner may say, "I'm only doing this for us," or "We both want the same thing," but that "we" is often a mask for me. Their compromises always cost you more. Their sacrifices always serve them. Yet, because it's framed as mutual, you feel guilty resisting it. You start telling yourself that love means give and take, not noticing that you're the one who always gives while they always take. The illusion of fairness becomes the chain that keeps you quiet. The brilliance of the mutual benefit tactic lies in how righteous it feels. It doesn't appeal to greed, it appeals to virtue. You're not being selfish, you're being cooperative. You're not being manipulated, you're being reasonable. And because the manipulator lets you feel noble about your compliance, you defend the very arrangement that drains you. You tell yourself it's partnership when it's dependence, progress when it's exploitation, love when it's control. What makes this tactic truly dark is that it doesn't rely on deceit. It relies on perspective. The manipulator doesn't lie about the benefit. They simply magnify yours and minimize theirs, creating the illusion of balance. And once you believe that your success is tied to theirs, they don't need to dominate you outright. You'll protect the system that binds you, smiling as you carry your share of the weight, never realizing that the scales were fixed from the very start. Ask, what would it take? Ask, what would it take is one of the most cunning manipulative tactics disguised as collaboration. It sounds harmless, curious, even respectful, but beneath its soft tone lies a trap of psychological commitment. When someone asks, what would it take? They're not seeking your refusal, they're dismantling it. This question doesn't confront resistance, it redirects it, transforming a firm no into a conditional maybe. In that single shift, the manipulator gains control over your boundaries, guiding you to design the very terms of your surrender. The brilliance of this tactic lies in its illusion of empowerment. It feels like a negotiation, but it's actually a reframing of consent. When you answer, well, I'd need X, Y, and Z, you've already stepped inside their frame. You're no longer rejecting the idea, you're problem solving for it. Your brain transitions from defense to construction, from resisting to cooperating. The manipulator doesn't have to convince you to say yes. They make you explain how you could say yes. And once you've verbalized it, your subconscious begins to believe in that possibility. Psychologically, this tactic leverages two powerful forces, the need for consistency and the desire to appear reasonable. When you articulate your conditions, you create a verbal contract with yourself. You've just told them what it would take, and now you feel subtly obligated to honor it if those terms are met. The manipulator exploits this self-imposed commitment masterfully. They nod, they listen, they agree to your terms, or at least appear to, and when they return later with your conditions partially met, refusing feels hypocritical. You feel trapped not by their request, but by your own words. In darker situations, what would it take becomes a tool of emotional disarmament. A partner who wants control might use it to erode your boundaries. What would it take for you to trust me again? The question sounds caring, but its purpose is to locate your weak spots, to find what emotional currency you value most. Once they know what matters to you, affection, apology, validation, they can weaponize it, giving just enough to keep you entangled, never enough to set you free. This tactic also thrives in business, politics, and persuasion. The manipulator frames impossibility as opportunity, forcing you to negotiate with yourself. What would it take for you to change your mind? What would it take for us to make this work? Each version pulls you deeper into the illusion of mutual progress, when in reality, the only real progress is theirs. They don't dismantle your barriers. They study them, map them, and build a door exactly where you said one could go. The most dangerous part of this manipulation is how good it feels. It flatters your ego, makes you feel wise, fair, and open-minded. You believe you're in control because you're setting conditions. But the question was never about conditions. It was about access. You think you're defining boundaries, you're actually revealing them, and by the time you realize it, the manipulator has already walked through the door you built for them. Follow-up reminders. Follow-up reminders are the quiet manipulator's pulse, the persistent echo that keeps your attention tethered long after the initial interaction ends. They don't force you to act, they make you remember. And in persuasion, memory is everything. The more something lingers in your awareness, the more legitimate, urgent, and necessary it begins to feel. Follow-up reminders exploit that truth, using gentle persistence to blur the line between suggestion and inevitability. At first, they seem harmless. A quick message, a polite nudge, a just checking in that feels considerate rather than coercive. But every reminder carries weight. Each one rekindles emotional momentum, reopening the loop that your brain tried to close. Humans are wired to complete cycles. We hate unresolved tension. A manipulator knows this. When they remind you, they're not asking for attention. They're reigniting your obligation. Every ping, every note, every hey, just following up reactivates guilt, curiosity, or unfinished desire. It makes not responding feel rude, neglectful, even wrong. This tactic works because it hides behind kindness and professionalism. It feels like persistence, not pressure, but beneath the politeness lies psychological conditioning. The repeated presence of the manipulator's message keeps them living rent-free in your thoughts. You start to internalize their consistency as care, their insistence as importance. Over time, their follow-ups become your conscience. You start feeling responsible for their expectations. You think, I should respond. I owe them closure. They've been so patient, but patience is the snare. Dark manipulators use follow-up reminders not just to stay visible, but to erode your emotional resistance. Each contact subtly resets the emotional tone, softening you with familiarity. Silence becomes impossible to maintain because every reminder feels like an open door you only need to step through. They don't demand compliance outright. They let repetition wear you down. Eventually, you respond not out of genuine interest, but to make the tension stop. The relief of responding feels like resolution, but it's actually surrender. In relationships, this tactic takes on a haunting intimacy. Just wanted to make sure you're okay. I miss our talks. Hope you haven't forgotten me. These phrases seem warm, even caring, but they're hooks designed to reopen emotional wounds. Each reminder pulls you back into orbit, making escape feel cruel. You tell yourself they mean well, yet every message is a thread pulling you closer to the same web you tried to leave. Follow-up reminders don't shout. They whisper, softly, steadily, relentlessly. They build pressure through presence, weaving guilt, nostalgia, and obligation into a rhythm your mind begins to expect. It's not the loud voice that breaks resolve. It's the quiet one that never stops calling your name. And by the time you respond, you'll tell yourself it was your decision, never realizing that the decision was planted in you long before you hit reply. Priming. Priming is the art of planting invisible seeds in the human mind, tiny cues that bloom into thoughts, feelings, and decisions without you ever realizing they were planted. It's not persuasion in the moment, it's preparation before it. The manipulator doesn't push, they program. They whisper to your subconscious long before the conscious mind wakes up to act. By the time you make a choice, it already feels like yours, even though it's been quietly engineered from the start. At its core, priming exploits the brain's pattern-seeking nature. Our minds connect everything we see, hear, and feel to what comes next. A single word, color, smell, or image can tilt perception and behavior. Show someone the color red before a negotiation, and they'll act more competitive. Play slow music in a store, and people linger longer, spending more. Mention trust in passing before asking a favor, and compliance skyrockets. The manipulator doesn't need to tell you what to do. They just need to frame the world so that what they want feels like your own idea. This technique works because the brain hates randomness. It constantly prepares for what it expects next, adjusting mood, attention, and judgment to match subtle cues. A skilled manipulator knows how to guide those expectations, carefully crafting the atmosphere, the tone, the associations that lead you where they want you. They might speak certain words repeatedly, safe, fair, reasonable, so when they make their offer later, it feels aligned with those very values. You think you're being logical, but your logic has already been colored. Priming often begins long before the main interaction. The manipulator sets the emotional stage early, through environment, tone, or even shared experiences. They might show vulnerability first to prime you for empathy, or use light humor to soften skepticism. They create the emotional weather before the storm. When the real persuasion begins, your guard is already lowered, your judgment softened by familiarity and comfort. You're not being convinced, you're being conditioned. The darkness of priming lies in how invisible it is. You can resist the command, but not a suggestion you don't notice. The manipulator hides influence in plain sight, in gestures, timing, repetition, even silence. They know that the human mind doesn't separate now from soon. It carries impressions forward, letting one moment quietly infect the next. A compliment today primes trust tomorrow. A subtle warning primes fear next week. The effect is cumulative, slow, and devastatingly effective. Priming turns free will into choreography. Every emotion, every word, every glance becomes a note in a song you think you're writing, but aren't. And that's its cruelest beauty. You'll defend the manipulator's influence as your own decision. You'll swear no one told you what to think because no one did. They simply showed you where to look, and your mind obediently filled in the rest. Foot in the door sequencing. Foot in the door sequencing is the manipulation of momentum, the psychological trick of leading someone step by step into compliance, starting so small that resistance feels unnecessary. It doesn't conquer through pressure, but through progression. A manipulator doesn't begin with a demand, they begin with a whisper, a harmless request that slips beneath awareness. Once you say yes, the groundwork is set. The next request grows slightly larger, then larger still, until the line between willingness and surrender disappears. The secret lies in the illusion of consistency. Humans have a powerful need to see themselves as rational and reliable. Once we agree to something small, our mind scrambles to align future behavior with that decision. We tell ourselves, I already said yes once. It would make sense to continue. This self-justification is the manipulator's greatest ally. They don't need to convince you each time. They just need to make you repeat what you've already agreed to in spirit. It begins innocently. A neighbor asks if you can help carry one box. Then, next week, they ask for help moving furniture. Soon you're spending an entire Saturday helping them move house. You never felt forced. Each step seemed reasonable. But the manipulator knows how to pace the sequence perfectly, calibrating each ask just below your threshold of objection. By the time the request becomes unreasonable, you're too deep in the rhythm of compliance to notice. In darker forms, foot in the door sequencing becomes emotional grooming. A controlling partner might first ask for small sacrifices, cancel one plan, skip one friend's call, share one secret. Each act feels minor, but each is a test, a calibration of control. The manipulator studies how far they can push before you push back, and when you don't, the next request comes. What began as, "Can you do this one thing for me?" evolves into, "You always do this for me." Compliance becomes identity. Resistance becomes betrayal. The most dangerous part of this manipulation is that it feels like free will. You choose each step. You convince yourself you're helping, cooperating, being kind. You don't realize that every yes rewrites your boundaries, that every act of cooperation resets your baseline of what's acceptable. The manipulator doesn't force you across the line. They guide you to redraw it yourself. Foot in the door sequencing thrives because it never feels like control. It feels like agreement, like progress, like trust. Each small act of compliance feeds the illusion of autonomy, and by the time you realize how far you've walked, the door has already closed behind you. You're not trapped by force. You're trapped by your own reflection in a series of tiny, harmless yeses that led you exactly where they wanted you to go.